Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News.
Whenever Parliament is in session on a Wednesday at midday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions. We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
And welcome to GB News Saturday. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. I'm Dawn Neese. I'm just retrieving my mic from my cleavage there. For the next 3 hours, I'll be keeping you company on on TV, online and on digital radio, keeping you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Coming up this hour. Now, the Met Police has apologised for causing further offence with an apology about an officer's use of the term openly Jewish to an anti-Semitism campaigner who was near a pro-Palestinian march. Then, thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow, calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond, though? And after the FA made the controversial decision to scrap replays from the FA Cup starting next season, the smaller clubs from across the country have bitten back. Sorry, I found it. Right, now, but this show is nothing without you and your views. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we'll be talking about today, or anything I'm going to gossip about. It's the weekend, isn't it, after all? It's very simple to do that. Visit gbnews.com/your say and join that conversation, or message me on our socials at GB News. But first, here's a treat for you. Here's the news with Cameron Walker.
Dawn, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 12. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB Newsroom. The Metropolitan Police has had to apologise for an earlier apology over a comments made to an anti-Semitism campaigner. Gideon Falter was stopped from crossing a road near a pro-Palestine march in London after an officer described him as openly Jewish. An initial apology from the force caused offence for suggesting opponents must know their presence is provocative. The Home Office, which has described the incident as unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and the Mayor of London. Pro-Israel demonstrators are now holding a peaceful counter-protest in central London today called Enough is Enough. The group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital.
It's just sad that it's come to this, that it's now regarded as not completely safe for Jewish people to walk in the streets of their own city. And not only is it distressing and vile as their views are, the distressing thing is also becoming normalised.
Can't walk through central London with a yarmulke on your head, no signs of any Israeli flag or support for Israel or any views on what may be going on in the Middle East. But if you're not allowed to walk across the streets in central London because you are openly Jewish, then it's time for the government to act.
3 people who died in a car crash near a retail park in northwest London have been named by police. Mohammed Zaid Dahani, Mohammed Ghazi and Suhail Zulfikar, all in their early 20s, died when their vehicle crashed through a car park fence, hitting a footbridge. It happened last weekend and the men were pronounced dead at the scene. It's understood 2 other passengers in the vehicle were injured, but their condition is not life-threatening. Investigations into the cause of the crash continue. A man who set himself alight outside the New York court where President Donald Trump's hush money trial is being held has died. Maxwell Azzarello was taken to hospital in a critical condition and later died from his injuries. Witnesses say he pulled pamphlets with conspiracy theories out of a backpack and threw them in the air before dousing himself with flammable liquid. Police say he did not appear to be targeting Trump or others involved in the trial. The former president's campaign has released a statement offering its condolences. Witness Fred Gates described what happened.
I was skeptical at first. I thought it was a gag, like he was going to... I didn't think he was going to actually light himself on fire. But when it seemed like he had real purpose, everybody started to run away from him. And then that's when he went up.
A whistleblower claims the Conservative Party were warned that MP Mark Menzies' alleged misuse of campaign funds may have constituted fraud, but there was no duty to report it. The filed MP lost the Conservative whip and was suspended as one of the Prime Minister's trade envoys after the Times published claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who locked him in a flat. Mr Menzies disputes the allegations. The party says it has been looking into the claims for several months and Lancashire police are reviewing the available information. A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who died serving the nation. Hundreds of Army and Naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London, marking 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. Chairman Nick Dutt, who laid a wreath at the event, says it's important young people are proud of their country.
We're trying to get the younger people involved in what we do. Patriotism has taken a hit over the last few years. And it tends to be a lot of older people who are involved. So the importance of getting younger people involved and taking part in this is critical to us, I believe.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or visit gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to GB News Saturday with Dawn.
Thank you very much. Cameron is rather good at that, isn't he? Right, let's get stuck into today's stories. It's been reported that Sunak is eyeing up a summer election. But the Tories are also reportedly considering cutting stamp duty in the autumn budget statement this year. Anyone know what's going on? The plans were considered for the spring budget but rejected in favour of cuts to national insurance. I don't know what's going on. Doesn't sound like Rishi Sunak knows what's going on. But one person who very definitely does is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Neal, an all-round lovely person. There he is, smiling in his library. Nigel, so we have, on one hand, possibly a summer election, but an autumn statement. What's going on?
Yeah, a bit confusing, isn't it, Dawn? What is going on at the moment is that some people are pressing Rishi Sunak to call an election in June or July. The reasoning behind this is that there may be an attempt to topple him after local elections, and he will get in first by calling a general election. Now we come on to the idea about cutting stamp duty. The plan would be to increase the rate at which house buyers pay it from 250,000 to 300,000. Now, this would happen in the autumn statement, which is due in September, based on the idea that Rishi Sunak will go long and call an election in November. Should all that fail, the idea then is that they'll whack it into the Conservative manifesto during an early election. I'm not sure that's clear, but that's the best I could do.
It's all as clear as mud, but it doesn't really matter because no one knows what's going on. Nigel, the stamp duty. I mean, in theory, it's great news. I mean, it does make an awful lot of sense. It'll help first-time buyers, help youngsters get on the housing ladder, etc., etc. But, I mean, you know, the national insurance thing didn't work. It didn't budge any opinions, did it? I mean, the polls are still disastrous for the Conservative Party. So, I mean, do they really think this will help them?
Well, that's absolutely the problem. I mean, the trouble with stamp duty is that it is a pretty appalling tax that most people hate. It's one of the only taxes where the government hoover up money but give you absolutely nothing back in return. So really, it's been long overdue for abolition. In fact, it goes back to the 17th century that it started. But the question about whether it moves the dial or not, national insurance cuts certainly haven't moved the dial. And the real problem people are facing is tax thresholds being frozen. So you're talking about 4 million people paying tax for the first time, another 3 million paying more tax. And all that is much more than the cuts that have been announced in national insurance. And certainly it'll be much more than if there is a cut in stamp duty.
It might just be me, Nigel, but I'm suspecting it isn't. But they do think we're a bit stupid, don't they? It's like, you know, the whole fiscal drag thing, as you've just mentioned. I mean, sort of like, hey, whoopie-doo, we're giving pensioners more money, but at the same time, we're freezing the tax threshold, so more pensioners will be paying more money in tax.
Yeah, that's right. You're now talking about 2 in 3 pensioners are now paying tax, which they didn't used to, and the thresholds are a real problem. That at the moment, what the government is doing is giving you £1 in national insurance cuts, but taking away £1.90 but in fiscal drag. So people are not feeling better off, and that's the key. That Rishi Sunak has no chance of winning an election unless people are feeling better off by the time it's called.
But Nigel, a little bird tells me that Rishi might be feeling a little bit more confident now because of our Angela Two Homes Rayner. Do you think that's true?
Well, I'm not sure that with the voters it is actually, frankly. I mean, if Rishi Sunak wants to talk about tax, he might mention the millions of pounds that his family saved in non-dom taxes. So the kind of small amount we're talking about with Angela Rayner, for most people, they're thinking there is a problem for her if she actually has not been telling the truth. But when it comes down to something quite complicated about paying capital gains tax on your primary residence and so on, I think most people think this is not a big deal. But we'll see. I mean, obviously, there's a police investigation going on. Angela Rayner's future will depend entirely on the outcome of that.
OK, and does Rishi Sunak's future depend entirely on whether a plane actually ever takes off for Rwanda with anybody on it apart from a Home Secretary?
Well, it'll be symbolic. It won't do anything to stop the boats, but at least if he can get one migrant in the air and landing in Rwanda, it shows he's actually got somewhere. It looks like that all this will get through the ping pong between the House of Commons and the House of Lords on Monday. So you are looking at a plane taking off probably around about June. But it's not the major issue with voters. Voters care about the cost of living. They care about NHS waiting lists. Those are still the top 2 items in every poll.
So even if a plane takes off, and we don't even know where these planes are coming from yet, let alone whether we're getting any migrants on them, I mean, do you think that if he does get the planes off in the summer, do you think he'll then go, right, OK, let's have an election now, I've got a plane off, people will believe me?
I think that by the time you get to that stage, it's a bit late to hold a summer election. An awful lot of people will be on a holiday come late July and in August, so that would be unlikely. So I don't think that the plane taking off in June is going to influence an election date, but local elections in May might.
Oh, yes, indeed. We've got lots of bridges to cross on that one. That's all going to... Something to look forward to, eh, Nigel? That's Nigel Nelson, our brilliant political supremo there. Thank you very much for explaining what the hell's going on Planet Politics today. Right now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, go to the website, which is at gbnews.com. Now, the story of the week, as far as I'm concerned, I've just been absolutely stunned by this story. The Met Police have apologised for causing further offence with an apology about an officer's use of the term openly Jewish to an anti-Semitism campaigner who was near a pro-Palestinian march.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. Right. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
In any case, the chief executive of a campaign against anti-Semitism was wearing a kippah skull cap when he was stopped from crossing a road near the demonstration in London last Saturday. I'm appalled by this story. Joining me now is political commentator Kai Wilshaw and broadcaster and journalist Mike Parry. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining me, both looking incredibly dapper. I have to say, Kai, looking very dapper today. Now, I was genuinely shocked by this story. I mean, so looking openly Jewish, I mean, I know he was wearing the skull cap, but openly Jewish in London is reason for a copper to stop you and have words with you.
It left me cold, so I can only imagine what British Jews are feeling at the minute. It is outrageous, and it will beg lots of questions about what does this actually mean? Why does he feel empowered to do this? Well, the answer is, of course, that I think there's rising intolerance in the number of the protests that we've seen recently. But the police are also, they're treading a fine line, aren't they? They're between a rock and a hard place in some senses, because on the one hand, they want to allow people to peacefully protest.
Of course,
knowing,
we all do.
Absolutely, but knowing, of course, that some of these protests have gone out of hand, so they want to also protect public safety. And there's huge political pressure and lots of eyes on them. After Rishi Sunak made that speech outside 10 Downing Street, it shows just how difficult their situation is as well.
I mean, the problem with this is, I mean, you know, obviously, the police were obviously trying to make sure the peace was kept. There were no problems, so they were trying to keep, you know, what's this chap's name again? Gideon Falter safe. They were trying to keep him safe. So I understand that. But by also trying to keep him safe, they were also being anti-Semitic at the same time. Mike, the one thing you're old enough to remember as well, back in the 1970s when the National Front were marching,
yes, absolutely,
and they were banned for being racist and anti-Semitic and all that, no problem whatsoever. So why are the pro-Palestinian marches still allowed to go on and still allowed to spout, frankly, still very anti-Semitic sentiments?
I so totally agree with you. I mean, you are openly Jewish. A statement from a policeman, that's like an accusation. Do you see what I mean? You know, I'm saying you're openly Jewish. Oh, do you mean I shouldn't be here? Gideon lives in London, so it's his hometown. He was merely exercising the right to walk the pavements of London. And I wonder whether if that policeman had gone up to somebody who was of Asian appearance and said, you are Islamic, you know, or you're openly Islamic.
You look like you might be a bit Hamas.
What sort of reaction we'd have had then? Supposing, for instance, he'd said, you are openly a member of the travelling community. It's hitting out at minority groups in a most despicable way, because the police in London and across the United Kingdom are there to defend everybody's rights. And if people do want to march, and I personally think they've been very lenient in the amount of verbosity they've allowed within the marches through London every weekend, instilling fear to other parts of the community. They don't clamp down on them. They don't clamp down on the, you know, River to the Sea chants, and yet they really, to my mind, pick on a guy because he's wearing a kippah, which makes him look Jewish. And you know, for years, for decades now, we've been told London's the most diverse city in the world. People have come from all over the world to be in London because it's tolerant and it's diverse. But that's not tolerant. And later, of course, an assistant commissioner of the Metropolitan Police doubled down on the mistake that the cop on the beat had made and made it even worse, and they had to withdraw both statements. So that's another issue here, Dawn. I don't think the police are fully qualified and fully understand their role on the streets of London.
They have. Now, to be fair, they have apologised. They've
apologised twice.
Yeah, they have apologised twice. The first one was a bad apology. But, you know, they have said, you know, the use of the term openly Jewish by one of our officers is hugely regrettable. That's putting it mildly, by the way.
Yeah.
But do you think now, Kai, that we have to accept that we do have two-tier policing?
I think there is a double standard, and I think it's now a political problem. After this double apology, as Mike says, it's become an issue for politicians to answer what now. And I don't think the answer is that we clamp down on protests at all. I think that would be regrettable indeed. But we do have to have a conversation around diversity and around how minority communities are protected. Because, yes, as Mike says, we've been told again and again that not only that London is the most diverse city, it welcomes people from everywhere, but that is de facto a good thing. I think there does need to be a conversation about how we integrate all these different communities.
The other problem with this two-tier policing is the fact that the Jewish community are one of the most integrated into our society.
And one of the smallest. There's only 250,000 people in this country. I mean, again, to me, it's the weakness of politicians. If the politicians who run this country, and that's the Conservative one at the moment, had made it clear where the acceptable lines of protest are, where the acceptable lines of mixing with other communities is before you put a foot wrong, we'd know more about it. But young policemen, because policemen these days don't have the experience that policemen 30 years ago had, because they're sometimes recruited on the fast track scheme. So they haven't had the street nous and gather the street nous. And young policemen are having to interpret the acceptability rules whilst they're out there on the beat. If you don't mind me saying, just for a moment, please, Dawn, Suella Braverman summed it up to me. She said, it's not right that one group of people cannot exercise their rights to enjoy London peacefully in order to allow another group to express their hatred. I think that sums it up very well. But somebody should have said that from the Home Office a long time ago.
Yeah. I don't see how it's got to this point either, because these protests have been going on since October. Right?
Yeah.
And they're going on pretty much every weekend in London and then in other cities.
Costing millions of pounds as well.
So where was that training? Where was that training for police officers?
I totally agree.
The way the wind is blowing, because I think the worry at the minute is this incident, horrifying, very regrettable, as the police said, as Dawn says, to put it mildly. But where's this going to go? I mean, I'm quite worried that something's going to happen that we could have seen coming a mile off. We've done nothing to stop.
I think in any other country something would have happened by now, but we're a very tolerant country, and unfortunately those who are of an extreme nature take advantage of our tolerance and our civilised will, you know?
Unfortunately, I'm going to be very civilised, and I should have a very civilised manner to shut up. We've run out of time on that one, but it's a very, very strong story, so let us know what you think on this. Really, really keen to know your thoughts on this one. As you've heard what we say, what do you think? Now, the Met Police have released an initial statement saying, in recent weeks we've seen a trend emerge with those opposed to the main protest appearing along the route to express their views. The fact that those often film themselves while doing so suggests they must know their presence is provocative, that they're inviting response and that they're increasing the likelihood of an altercation. They then deleted the first and released a fresh one, saying, we have reflected on the strength of the response to our previous statement in an effort to make a point about the policing of protests we called further offence. This was never our intention. We have removed that statement and we apologise. Being Jewish is not a provocation. Jewish Londoners must be able to feel safe in this city. Well, let me know if you do. Now, let's talk about something fun, shall we? The chance to win £10,000 worth of Greek cruise, a luxury travel bundle and a whopping £10,000 in tax-free cash. My voice has got up there. It's our biggest prize of the year so far, and here's how it could all be yours.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Oh, that water looks nice, doesn't it? Good one. Good luck. Get entering. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. St George's Day has been marked by a major parade in central London today with tributes to English men and women who have died serving the nation. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't get too far.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Cheryl Baker. Good morning, Cheryl.
Good morning.
When you think back to 1981, I mean, obviously the ABBA victory then wasn't all that long ago, 9 years earlier. Do you think they had a huge influence then on the sort of direction that Eurovision was taking?
Yeah, they did. They changed it completely. Because up to then, it had all been very staid and a bit posh, long frock, sticky bow ties, you know. And then they came along and they blew it out of the water. They looked so different. And they modernised it. And I think, yeah, it made a big change. Made a big change after that.
And we were watching your performance on Eurovision a little bit earlier on of making your mind up. I mean, you had so much fun, didn't you, up on that stage? Were you, in some part, inspired by ABBA?
Yes, I would say so. It was, ABBA was 74. I turned professional in 75 and did my first song for Europe, which was, you know, when they choose the British song to go forward. I did my first one in February 1976. So, yeah. It was only months after ABBA's performance that I started my own Eurovision journey. Yeah, they just changed the face of it. They changed the face of Eurovision. And if you look at what Eurovision is now, I think that all started with ABBA's performance. It made people think this is much more than just a song contest. It's all about the look. I mean, the clothes, they looked fantastic. And even the composer, or not the composer, what's he called? The conductor. He was dressed as Napoleon. It made it fun. Fantastic song, obviously. Brilliant singing. But the whole look of it just changed the way that Eurovision is, and to this day.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch, understandably so, given what we've been talking about with that the story about the Jewish man being told that he looked obviously Jewish and probably wasn't safe to be in the streets of London. Andrew, good afternoon. Andrew says, imagine if the Met had said it to a woman wearing a hijab that she was openly Muslim next to a synagogue and therefore could be arrested. So many echoing that sentiment, Andrew. Meanwhile, Mark says, to me, it seems only certain groups can protest. In other words, biased policing is occurring. You're not the only one saying that. Many of our MPs have said that as well, haven't they? Meanwhile, another Mark says, I agree we shouldn't clamp down on protests, but all protests for anything should follow the same laws, and this is what we're coming up against. Meanwhile, Marion says, I cannot believe this happened, nor can I, Marion. The MP who said there were no-go zones in the UK was right, because that police officer implying that if you are Jewish, you shouldn't be near a pro-Palestine march, hence no-go zone. A very good point. But meanwhile, Danny says the police were obviously concerned for this man's safety. So the question I would ask of the politicians is, why have you not introduced laws to ban them from marching if there's a risk, threat to anyone Jewish or opposing views? Yeah, it's a fine line to tread, isn't it, between, you know, the freedom to protest peacefully and march and causing offence and upsetting people. It's a fine, but that was really going too far. But let me know your thoughts on all the stories we've been discussing today. It's very simple. You can have your say. gbviews.com/your say and join the conversation, or message me on our socials at GB News. Now, St George's Day, England's national day, although you might have missed it occasionally, has been marked by a major parade in central London today with tributes to English men and women who have died serving the nation. Hundreds of military and naval cadets marched past the cenotaph in central London and laid wreaths, the nation's memorial to the fallen. Joining me now is GB News reporter Will Hollis. Will, thank you very much. What's been happening this morning?
Yes, well, the cenotaph is the focal point for Britain's remembrance, and that is also combined with remembering national significant days like St George's Day, and those two have been combined today as the Royal Society for St George, what describes itself as England's premier patriotic society, honoured not just English armed service men and women who have died defending our country, but also marks St George's Day, which is, of course, next week on Tuesday, the 23rd of April. Now, what we've seen today is hundreds of armed forces cadets, Navy cadets, Sea cadets, Air cadets and Army cadets as well, and they've been marching past the cenotaph. There's also been a brief 2-minute silence and wreaths have been laid. We even saw a Second World War veteran, and we spoke a little bit about D-Day, the 80th anniversary, which we're going to be honouring and marking later this year, but particularly for St George's Day, England's national day, the day when we remember and honour our patron saint, somebody that has been the patron saint since at least the 14th century. We've been hearing from Nick Dutt, the chairman of the Royal Society of St George, about why it is so important to mark such an occasion.
Well, I think it's a very important day to celebrate. The Royal Society of St George have been laying a wreath at the cenotaph since 1921, so just after it was built. And it's a great way of commemorating those who sacrificed so much for us. In the last 30 years, we've added a cadet parade to it, so it's great to get the younger generation, the youth involved, and give them something that they'll always remember.
Well, Nick was telling me in that extended interview about how the society is non-political. It welcomes people from all faiths and backgrounds, but they are fiercely patriotic, and they say it is something that needs to be defended at times when those values of Englishness, free speech, democracy and tolerance are under attack. And I think this is a real display about how you can be proud of England while not necessarily being proud of nationalism.
And thank you very much. That's Will Hollis at the cenotaph for us today. Talking about one of the most respected military saints in Christianity. I didn't know he was so connected to the military, St George, but there you go. Lovely report there. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, it's back to the news headlines with Cameron.
Thanks, Dawn. It's 12:30. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. The Metropolitan Police has had to apologise for an earlier apology over a comment made to an anti-Semitism campaigner. Gideon Falter was stopped from crossing a road near a pro-Palestine march in London after an officer described him as openly Jewish. An initial apology from the force caused offence for suggesting opponents must know their presence is provocative. The Home Office, which has described the incident as unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and Mayor of London. Meanwhile, pro-Israel demonstrators are now holding a peaceful counter-protest in central London called Enough is Enough. The group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital. 3 men who died in a car crash near a retail park in northwest London have been named by police as Mohammed Zaid Denhani, Mohammed Ghazi and Zohail Zulfikar. Their vehicle went through a car park fence before hitting a footbridge. The victims, all in their 20s, died at the scene. 2 other passengers were injured, but their condition isn't life-threatening. A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. Hundreds of Army and Naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London to mark 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to thegbnews.com/alerts. Now back to GB News Saturday with Dawn.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Remember, you can let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing about today, or just have a chat, basically, visiting gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation. Or message me on our socials at GB News. Really simple. Loads more coming up. Cracking show for you. Thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond, though? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Mark White was saying there, Sue, that he thinks it's getting worse, and you were nodding along to that. You've seen this over decades. Situation is sprawling along the coast, more people,
yes.
And the danger is ramping up.
Definitely, because the numbers and the money it's run like a military operation. I mean, I've been told that by the National Crime Agency, and I don't need to be told it by them to know it. It is meticulous because there's so much money involved. So they're marshalling migrants here, the gangs, they're controlling the gangs, and there will be a kingpin. You know, in some city far away in Erbil, or even in Paris, or in Brussels, who never goes anywhere near the beaches. It's like a Ponzi scheme, really.
Yeah. With that in mind, there's such vested interest, such money, such demand, a never-ending string of demand of people who want to come here.
People are already on their way, remember?
Yeah.
If we stop them now, they're already leaving. There's people leaving the Sudan now are going to reach the only place they want to get to, the French beaches, to get to the UK. They'll arrive in 2.5 years' time.
And so,
you see, they're on their way.
If it's that organised, that lucrative, that desirable, how on earth do we ever break that chain?
It sounds incredibly harsh, but I'm sure, I think if the EU change politically in the June elections, which I think it probably will,
yes,
I think they will put up, as the Greeks have done, holding camps all over Europe, the coasts of Europe, where people are assessed, just to see who is coming in, which would be a plus, as the Greeks have done, because we have no idea who is coming in.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. I hope you're having a wonderful weekend out there. Now, thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow today. The organisers Believe in Scotland say the event will be about sharing their positive vision for an independent Scotland, with First Minister Humza Yousaf expected to speak later on today. Joining me now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, to bring us up to speed on what's going on. It looks lovely weather up there for a start, Tony. What's happening? Lots of flags behind you.
Good afternoon. Well, indeed, we have just about a few minutes now into the pro-independence march, and you know we've seen quite a lot of different groups already. Obviously, Believe in Scotland and Pensioners for Independence are the two main groups behind this event. Although we have seen an integration of a Free Palestine march along with that as well. We've seen the usual amount of pipe bands, etc., and it's quite fun. There's quite a lot of people, good spirits, as you said, pretty much on the back of the weather. But of course, underlying everything, it's been a bad old week for Humza Yousaf. He is going to be speaking at George Square, the end point of this march, and he is going to be hoping to end this week on a high after, of course, that arrest and charging of Peter Murrell on Thursday, as well as the ditching of one of the key climate targets of the Scottish Government, and this never-ending debate about the Hate Crime Act. But even when we drill down to the independence movement, well, you know, there's even divisions there. Here today we're going to hear from Humza Yousaf as well as the Scottish Greens, but in about 3 weeks' time we're going to have yet another independence march from a completely different group organised by All Under One banner, and part of that is because some of the representatives that will be at that march from the Alba Party, well, they have completely different views, and the Scottish Greens, well, they're not willing to march with them. So until there's this unification of the pro-independence movement in Scotland, it seems to be that it's quite a fractured debate platform at the minute. But as you can see, you know, there is, despite, you know, the referendum happening in 2014 and that 55% voting to remain as part of the union, there is still an appetite here. There is still a conversation to be had, perhaps not with the two governments that we have at the minute, but certainly for now at least, people are out in Glasgow today enjoying the sunny weather, and that in itself is something to be celebrating.
Absolutely. Tony, just a quickie. Can't help but notice the people behind you very, very well behaved. As you say, it's lovely weather up there, but it does seem to be quite an older demographic.
Yeah, I think what we had seen, we spoke to the police just before we came on air, and there was going to be a staggered release of people to allow them. So we saw some of the disabled and the lower mobility members out in front, but we've seen quite a lot of students. We are actually just off camera here is the University of Glasgow, so this is quite a student-dense area. However, as you say, yeah, you're right, there is quite a higher demographic of the older generations here. And very much many of them, you know, some of the posts we've seen on social media this morning, you know, people on this march, first march of April, they are out here, you know, to march on behalf of people who are no longer with us, who wanted independence from all those decades ago. Very much so. A well-behaved crowd, though, as we say, people probably regretting not putting on something a little lighter in this sunshine.
That's great. Thank you very much. That's Tony Maguire in Glasgow for Indy Ref 2 March, which is looking very peaceful. Thank you very much, Tony. Now, a march that is also going on today is a pro-Israel protest. It's been organised in London today, central London, by activist group Enough is Enough. The group says that the protest aims to be peaceful and non-provocative, reclaiming London as the bastion of democracy and multiculturalism. Something I think we'd all support, wouldn't we? Joining me now from the protest is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, lovely to see you. What is happening where you are now?
Yes, hello, Dawn. I hope you can hear me. It's very, very noisy indeed. But basically, we have a pro-Israel gathering behind me, organised, as you say, by Enough is Enough. They said that they've had enough of, well, the pro-Palestinian marches that we see week after week. They describe them as the anti-Israel hate marches. They say that they've made central London an intimidating no-go area for Jews and many others. They say that this protest is peaceful, that it's non-provocative. I spoke to some of the people here a little bit earlier. Let's just take a look at what they had to say.
It's just sad that it's come to this, that it's now regarded as not completely safe for Jewish people to walk in the streets of their own city. And not only is it distressing and vile as their views are, the distressing thing is also becoming normalised.
Can't walk through central London with a yarmulke on your head, no signs of any Israeli flag or support for Israel or any views on what may be going on in the Middle East. But if you're not allowed to walk across the streets in central London because you are openly Jewish, then it's time for the government to act.
Yes, I was also talking to a lady that said that her daughter had very narrowly missed becoming one of the hostages back on October the 7th, where, of course, Hamas seized hundreds of people. We know that there's dozens of them still in Gaza and murdered about 1,200 others on that terrible day. That, of course, led to the war in Gaza, which is still going on, causing so much division across the Middle East and indeed here on the streets of London. Now, on the other side of the road, there is a counter-protest, a pro-Palestine protest, if you like. I can't honestly tell you what they're saying because the pro-Israel lot behind me are making so much noise. But this is unusual, isn't it? Because we're used to week after week after week, tens of thousands of people protesting, wanting a war in Gaza, and that has led to many Jewish people feeling threatened. We had the incident which has made a lot of news, a police officer telling a Jewish man basically that he was provoking and that he might be subject to arrest if he didn't go away from a previous march. Now, that's been widely condemned, the government making it clear that Jewish people must be free to go about their business. But I have to say, I've covered a lot of these marches, these protests, both pro-Israel and more often pro-Palestine. The police do have an extremely difficult job to do. And as they told that man, they were concerned for his safety because they said simply to him in another of the clips that I've watched that if he was attacked, they simply don't have the resources, they simply don't have the numbers of police to protect him. And that is the issue, isn't it? These marches, most people on the pro-Palestine marches wanting peace, but a small minority really with a different agenda and many people feeling threatened. But the mood here, I have to say, the Israeli protesters here, very upbeat, saying they will not be cowed, bring back the hostages. Also saying, one of them, free Palestine from Hamas and bring the Israeli hostages home. I'm going to hand back to you now, Dawn. I can hardly hear myself speak. I hope you've been able to hear what I've been saying.
Catherine, thank you very much. That's Catherine Forster in London with us, covering the Enough is Enough, our pro-Israel protest group there, and as you saw, a counter-protest for the pro-Palestine as well. Catherine will be covering that story for us throughout the afternoon and see what develops. OK, well, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Football, yay! After the FA made the controversial decision to scrap replays from the FA Cup starting from next season, the smaller clubs from across the country have bitten back. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate our weather, bringing some warm sunshine for some of us. However, there will also be some patchy cloud. Low pressure remains never too far away out towards the north of the UK, but this large area of high pressure dominates our weather through the rest of the weekend. This will bring some warm sunshine, particularly for Wales, southwestern parts of England and Northern Ireland as well. However, there will be some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland that slowly spills its way southwards as we go through Saturday afternoon. Perhaps a few more breaks than the graphics are showing, so there could be some brighter spells in places. And it will be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs in the south of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees, but definitely feeling a little chillier under that cloud across parts of Scotland. Into Saturday evening, there will still be those clear spells around, but some patchy rain does arrive across northern parts of Scotland and slowly sinks its way southwards as we go into the early hours of Sunday morning. Some clear spells across eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland and Western Scotland as well, and turning chilly under those clear skies, although temperatures holding up well above zero under all that cloud. Into the start of Sunday, after a chilly start under those clear skies, it will be quite a bright start, particularly for southern and eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, seeing some sunshine through the morning. However, that patchy rain across Scotland slowly sinks its way southwards into northern parts of England, so bringing quite a grey day here. In the sunshine, though, still feeling warm again, highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the south and around 9 or 10 degrees under that cloud.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, the FA have made the controversial decision to scrap replays from the FA Cup starting from next season, with a number of clubs expressing their opposition to the decision, and the FA have now released the following statement. We have listened to the concerns expressed over the last 24 hours and would like to outline the approval process which was undertaken for the 2024-25 professional game football calendar. We have been discussing the calendar for this season with the Premier League and the EFL for well over a year. Removing Emirates FA Cup replays was discussed in the early meetings, and all parties accepted they could not continue. The discussions then focused on how to make all of our competitions stronger, despite having fewer dates available and wanting to maintain player welfare. Blimey, that goes on longer than some of West Ham's football games. Aidan McGee joins me now to explain why smaller clubs are getting angry. I understand it, but why are they getting angry?
They're getting angry, Dawn, because the replays are a lifeline to some clubs. So, for example, yes, it's luck of the draw, of course, but if you're fortunate enough to draw Man United at home in an FA Cup tie, you get a draw, you go to Old Trafford, they share the gate receipts. So if it's a normal Premier League game or normal EFL game, you go away from home, you'll say Exeter, and you go and play just locally down at Plymouth, across into Devon, you go and play Plymouth at Home Park. The home team keeps the gate receipts. In the FA Cup and in the League Cup, it's separated, it's 50-50. So that's why it's quite lucrative if you can get a replay. That's why it's important. Now, don't get me wrong, it doesn't rule out the opportunity of getting a away tie at Old Trafford in the first game, and there'll be 76,000 people there, and the money's split half and half. But the replays are a bit of a lifeline to clubs who are really struggling. And we know what the FA Cup does when it arrives in your town. In your town, it can make a big difference. Any town, actually, can sometimes make a big difference when it arrives even in a big city, even though the prestige of the competition isn't quite what it was maybe 20 or 30 years ago. In addition to that, Chris Wilder, the Sheffield United manager, I mean, they're at the bottom of the Premier League at the moment, but it's still a club who historically have spent most of the last 30 years outside the Premier League. But he said, look, the big clubs just don't want to be bothered with replays. They don't want to be going to Southend on a Tuesday night. And what's annoying a lot of fans is that, and a lot of clubs, is that these clubs, particularly the top six, because that's where it's driven from, they're going away at the end of the season, within a few days of the season ending, and they're going to play lucrative friendlies for big money in Australia, in America, in the Far East. So if they've got time for that, surely they've got time for a replay at Gillingham on a Wednesday night at the end of January.
This was a point that really annoys me, this story. It's basically, so these really, really expensive players on hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Yes.
And they've got big squads as well. They've got like three different teams that all the, the top six we're talking about here, they can put out.
They should be able to win the first game anyway. There shouldn't be a need for replays anyway, because they should win the match. Well, so if they can't do that, then sorry, but they don't really deserve the leniency of having to of avoiding that trip to somewhere where they would consider godforsaken on a Tuesday night.
Football is really not fair these days, is it?
No, it really isn't. But we have to consider that they are interested in player welfare as also. I mean, some clubs are paying. If you're Liverpool and Manchester City and Arsenal this season, you're probably getting on for low 60s in terms of games. It is quite a workload.
You're the most expensive player in the country and how much they're on at the moment. I mean, they're not exactly, they're not exactly...
No, they are, but it doesn't matter how much. You could pay someone £10 million a game, but they're still going to wear out if they play a certain number of games. There's science behind that, Dawn. There really is. Any sports scientist will tell you that. They're trying to play fewer matches than more. And, to be fair, the competition organisers would say, we want to play them more. We want to play more matches. We want to get more out of you. So there is a science behind it as well. It's not all one way, but something has to be done. I mean, all right, it's an election year, so you would expect the Prime Minister to maybe have a throwaway remark on this. He said that, this is Rishi Sunak, he said yesterday that, although he considers it wrong, it is a matter for the football authorities, Keir Starmer. So Keir Starmer went on to say it's also wrong, it needs to be looked at. I just wonder, though, Dawn, and I think this is a detail that nobody else has mentioned. They've tried to push this through. And, by the way, the EFL said they weren't part of the conversation, contrary to what the FA said yesterday.
I just say they didn't, yeah.
I think they're pushing this through before the football regulator comes in, because this falls right into the lap of the football regulator, and they're maybe chucking out their dirty linen or chucking out their rubbish before the regulator comes in and gets their hand on stuff. By which point it'll be too late to reverse it.
Is there any other good news sport we can talk about that people listening and watching are going to be happy about? Tennis is going on.
Yeah, that's well. Emma Raducanu's finished. She got knocked out of the quarter-final. Yeah, she did, but that's a good performance because she's been injured so much in the last 3 years. Yeah. She had a good performance last week in the Billie Jean Cup competition over in France on clay. Another performance on clay today, and she lost to a four-time Grand Slam winner, Iga Swiatek. So that is a decent performance. It was straight sets, but the first one went to a tiebreaker. Signs that she is just peaking in time for the French Open. That might come too soon, but well, she'll be there. But I don't know if she's going to trouble any of the go deep into the tournament.
When's the French Open?
French Open will be end of May, start of June.
Right. Okay.
And then not long at all. And then you've got Wimbledon backed on straight after that.
Of course, yeah.
So who knows? I mean, it's a switch of gear because you're on the grass there, but I wonder whether she might time her absolute peak, if she keeps going on the trajectory she's on, for the US Open, which, of course, she won in fantastic fashion. She didn't get the credit she deserved for that, She won that tournament aged, 17, I think it was, maybe 18. She did not drop a set.
Very young.
Extraordinary.
Yeah.
We don't talk about it enough.
And you're off to football now as well. Aidan, thank you very
QPR,
much for This Is Dawn Neeson. GB News Saturday, there's loads more coming up. But before, for all you football fans out there at the games, here's the weather with Ellie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate, but it will be feeling a little chillier along some eastern coasts. The area of high pressure situated across the UK does bring a bit of a northeasterly breeze, so some chillier conditions, but plenty of dry weather around due to that area of high pressure. So some late afternoon and evening sunshine for some of us. However, some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland will bring some outbreaks of patchy rain, particularly for northern parts of Scotland, slowly sinking its way southwards into the early hours of the morning. Southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland holding on to those clearer skies and turning quite chilly there, however, remaining frost-free under that cloud and patchy rain. So for eastern parts of Scotland, a bit of a cloudy and grey and damp start to the day on Sunday. However, southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine through the morning. Perhaps one or two showers bubbling up across southeastern parts of England through the afternoon, but it should be staying dry for most places. However, that band of patchy rain slowly continues to sink its way southwards and feeling quite chilly under that cloud and rain too. However, in the sunshine, feeling very pleasant, highs of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees across the south. Monday does start a bit of a greyer day for most of us. Outbreaks of rain continue to slowly push their way southwards, but southeastern parts of England probably holding on to that sunshine and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine too. Maybe one or two showers around on Tuesday or Wednesday, but temperatures will be slowly recovering closer to average for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Ellie. Not too bad, is it, out there? Now, there's lots more coming up on today's show. The Tories are also reportedly considering cutting stamp duty in the autumn statement this year. But will this be enough to save Sunak's bacon? Will anything? At the same time as maybe a summer election? Go figure that one. I can't work it out. In any case, all of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I don't think you can go and watch a Shakespeare play unless you already know it. It's almost like you have to understand the story and the characters and perhaps have even done a bit of reading into it. Because if you went completely blind, especially in today's world where we don't speak in that kind of way, it is, I think, probably a bit alienating.
But Dawn is saying it is alienating at the moment because of the lack of representation.
You know what, the actual phrasing they use, right, OK, the disproportionate representation propagated white, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgender male narratives. I'm sure there's people sitting in a room going, what's the most ridiculous thing we can come up with today?
Yes.
But are really just chuck all these words at it, cisgender, and it's just insane. Of course, Shakespeare was what it was back in the day, and that's why it's mostly blokes and they're mostly white.
And lots of speculation that he was actually gay, isn't there? Because he never really saw Anne Hathaway very often and stayed away a lot of the time. I don't know, maybe he was a big
He might have been transgender for all I know. I mean, I don't...
Biggins, I'm looking at you.
No, I think you're right. I mean, I think that goes for the profession too. I mean, I do think I mean, I remember seeing Macbeth in London with Judi Dench and Ian McKellen, and it was one of the most exciting evenings ever. And it was a cold night at the Donmar Theatre, outside and inside, and that gave it atmosphere. There are certain things that you go along and see something else, and you think, I'll walk out in the interval.
Yeah. Macbeth is a sexy play, though.
Let's talk about, there's so many. Can I live to be 100?
Oh, this is depressing.
I think it is depressing. I like to stay here now. I don't want to live to 100.
Don't say
I'm
that.
right behind you.
I don't even want to. My father died at 63. That'll be me gone this year.
Hello and welcome to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson. Our cracking show coming up for the next 2 hours, keeping you company on your telly, online and on digital radio. Keeping you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Now, coming up this hour, the Labour Party has called on Tories to scrap their shoplifters charter as new analysis reveals 1,000 shoplifting offences are committed every day. That's a theft a minute. Then thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond this time, though? And new research shows that Gen Z is increasingly finding the Great British Fry-Up too fatty or too time-consuming to put together. I'm asking, will Generation Woke kill off our fry-up sausages? But this show is nothing without you and your views, especially on the sausages. So let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation or message me on our socials, really simple, at GBNews. But first, it's news headline time with Cameron Walker.
Thanks, Dawn. Good afternoon. It's 1 minute past 1. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB Newsroom. The Metropolitan Police has had to apologise for an earlier apology over a comment made to an anti-Semitism campaigner. Gideon Falter was stopped from crossing a road near a pro-Palestine march in London after an officer described him as openly Jewish. An initial apology from the force caused offence for suggesting opponents must know their presence is provocative. The Home Office, which is described the incident as unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and the Mayor of London, who say it's concerning. Pro-Israel demonstrators are now holding a peaceful counter-protest in London called Enough is Enough. The group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital.
It's just sad that it's come to this, that it's now regarded as not completely safe for Jewish people to walk in the streets of their own city. And not only is it distressing and vile as their views are, the distressing thing is also becoming normalised.
Can't walk through central London with a yarmulke on your head, no signs of any Israeli flag or support for Israel or any views on what may be going on in the Middle East. But if you're not allowed to walk across the streets in central London because you are openly Jewish, then it's time for the government to act.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters have been marching in Sheffield demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. They're accusing Israel of using famine as a weapon of war and criticising the government for continuing to arm the country. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign also took aim at Barclays Bank, urging it to sever ties with companies which supply weapons and military equipment to Israel. 3 men who died in a car crash near a retail park in northwest London have been named by police. Mohammed Zaid Dahani, Mohammed Ghazi and Suhail Zulfikar died when their vehicle went through a car park fence and hit a footbridge. It happened last weekend, and the men, who were in their early 20s, were pronounced dead at the scene. 2 other passengers were injured, but police say their condition is not life-threatening. Investigations into the cause of the crash continue. A man who set himself alight outside the New York court where former President Donald Trump's hush money trial is being held has died. Maxwell Azzarello was taken to hospital in a critical condition and later died from his injuries. Witnesses say he pulled pamphlets with conspiracy theories out of a backpack and threw them in the air before dousing himself with flammable liquid. Police say he did not appear to be targeting Trump or others involved in the trial. The former president's campaign has released a statement offering its condolences. Witness Fred Gates describes what happened.
I was skeptical at first. I thought it was a gag, like he was going to... I didn't think he was going to actually light himself on fire. But when it seemed to... It seemed like he had real purpose. Everybody started to run away from him. And then that's when he went up.
A whistleblower claims the Conservative Party was warned that MP Mark Menzies' alleged misuse of campaign funds may have constituted fraud, but there was no duty to report it. The filed MP lost the Conservative whip and was suspended as one of the Prime Minister's trade envoys after The Times published claims he used political donations to cover medical expenses and pay off bad people who had locked him in a flat. Mr Menzies disputes the allegations. The party says it's been looking into the claims for several months, and Lancashire Police are reviewing the available information. A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who died serving the nation. Hundreds of Army and Naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London, marking 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. Some members of the public were there to celebrate the day.
Well, we're big military people, so it means a lot to come down and celebrate and be part of it all, really.
It's obviously the patron saint of our country, and obviously I'm the old brigade, and it means something to me.
We're English. He's a patron saint of England, so we've got to mark it. Scotland do it, Wales do it. We've got to do it as well, and we've got to do it bigger and better.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to GB News Saturday with Dawn Neeson.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Right, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? It's been reported that Rishi Sunak is eyeing up a summer election. Or is he? But the Tories are also reportedly considering cutting stamp duty in the autumn budget statement this year. Make it make sense. The plans were considered for the spring budget but rejected in favour of cuts to national insurance. Does anyone know what's going on, please? Joining me now is GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson, who may just be able to give us a clue. Hello, Nigel. What's going on?
Well, we start with the fact that Rishi Sunak was thinking of calling the election on May the 2nd, the same day as local elections. So that was the reason for national insurance cuts at the end of last year. He planned then to get a plane off to Rwanda by the spring, all in the hope that that would actually make it possible to hold an election on the same day. Had to scrap those plans because the polls didn't shift at all, no matter what he did. Now some Tories are urging him to go for June or July, but it still seems that he really wants to go long, looking towards the end of the year, either October or November, which would give Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, the time to put in an autumn statement with some more tax cuts, one of them being a cut in stamp duty.
Right, OK. And obviously, the longer they leave it, the more chance they've got of interest rates falling again still. Is that part of their thinking?
Yeah, the economy is genuinely improving. So although inflation figures this month weren't as good as they expected them to be, it is likely that inflation will fall to the Bank of England 2% target by general election time. That means an interest rate cut. It may not come as early as June as people hoped because of the inflation figures that have just been published, but it should come during the summer. So yes, I mean, generally speaking, the economy will improve. The big problem for the Tories, though, is that people's personal circumstances haven't, and that's because of tax thresholds being frozen and an awful lot of people paying an awful lot more.
Will anything make any difference now, Nigel? I mean, sort of like, you know, the cuts to national insurance didn't really make any difference. I mean, stamp duty, as you say, it's hated by pretty much everyone, and the Conservatives and Labour aren't keen on it. So, in theory, we could sort of like, you know, we could deal with that. But is it going to win them votes?
Well, this is the problem. I can't find a Tory MP who thinks that the election can be won, that they've all kind of resigned themselves to the fact that they're going to lose. The big question really is, if you switch leader now, will it be a damage limitation exercise? In other words, will fewer Tory MPs lose their seats? And that's the kind of thinking, especially amongst the right wing of the Tory party, for trying to get rid of Rishi Sunak. And if they try and get rid of Rishi Sunak, that comes back to our point about a June or July election, because the chances are we just call one and say, look, let's go for it, that I'm not going to let them have a go at trying to depose me. I'll go to the country instead.
Do you think Rishi's feeling a bit more cheerful with all our Angela Rayner to Housegate situation? Do you think that's giving him any hope?
No, not really.
OK, that's another one.
I think we've got to a kind of tit-for-tat stage with that one. So the Tories report Angela Rayner to the police. Then Mark Menzies comes along, and Labour report him to the police. So I mean, at the moment, you've got one scandal kind of knocking out the other. If there is one, I mean, obviously it's up to the police now to come up with the results of their investigation to Angela Rayner, and indeed, if they decide to launch one into Mark Menzies.
I love talking to you, Nigel. You're a really lovely, wonderful person, but you never cheer me up. It's all a mess, isn't it, basically? Thank you very much for that, Nigel. Now, for all the best analysis and opinion on that story and much more, go to our website, gbnews.com. Now, should we talk shopping, or rather, shoplifting? The Labour Party has called on Tories to scrap their shoplifters' charter, as new analysis reveals 1,000 shoplifting offences are committed every day. This comes as data shows charges for such offences have dropped more than a quarter over the past 5 years. Labour said offenders were getting off scot-free as the fall had not been matched by a rise in other penalties. Joining me now is GB News host of the Saturday 5, Albie Ancona, and GB News senior political commentator Nigel is coming back because I love him so much, even though he can be slightly depressing. OK, let's, Albie, make some sense of this story. OK, so Labour have accused the Tories of a shoplifting charter because we have just so much shoplifting now and no one's getting prosecuted for it.
So in 2014, when Theresa May was the Home Secretary, she introduced a new policy, which was basically where the police would not have to investigate in the same way as they had before anything which was stolen that was under £200, so that the police could actually, rather than having to deal with this through the courts and in a way which is quite expensive, they could just deal with it through the post in a way that was quite quick. But what that's actually led to is what some people might call an unintended consequence, which is that the police seemingly just aren't investigating any crime where there is a theft under £200, which has led to shopkeepers feeling that their thieves are just getting off with impunity. And that's why Labour are saying that the Tories have caused a shoplifters charter.
Nigel, what do you make of this one?
Brilliant explanation by Albie. I think that's exactly where the situation we've arrived at. I mean, the police just don't want to investigate stuff that is actually worth less than £200. So what Labour are talking about is that they want to turn this around. The way they will do it is to employ 13,000 more neighbourhood police and police support officers. The idea being that when you have even minor crime, it actually gets investigated. It's not just shoplifting. We don't get car thefts investigated. We don't get burglaries investigated. The idea is the police will do the job that we all think they ought to do.
Did Labour explain how they were going to pay for all these extra people?
Yeah, I mean, Labour have got a variety of things. They've got that one of them was going to be the non-dom tax, and of course...
That's paying for an awful lot, it has to be said.
That Jeremy Hunt then nicked that money to pay for national insurance cuts. So Labour reckon they can fund it through cracking down on tax dodgers. We'll have to see. I think that Labour need to come up with some more detailed figures about how they will pay for all their various things. But it would have helped if Jeremy Hunt hadn't stolen the money in the first place and basically purloined one of Labour's best ideas.
Albie, this shoplifting epidemic that we are seeing, I mean, it is terrible. And if you talk to certainly sort of like small, corner shop owners, I mean, they just literally, there's nothing they can do. They're terrified to get involved because many people are violent. Do we think it is because of the cost of living crisis and people are desperate, or do we think that it is because it is literally so easy to go shoplifting now? You know you're going to get away with it, so you may as well.
I think it's probably a mix of both. If we think back to 2014, that was in the middle of austerity, that was in the middle of when we were recovering from the 2008 financial crash. So some people might say times were tough then too. Are times tougher now in 2024 than they were in 2014? I can't answer that question. But some people certainly think that because of the cost of living crisis that we're seeing at the moment, that is driving up low-level crime, and people are taking advantage of the fact that they're not necessarily going to be investigated for things being stolen under £200. But there is certainly a feeling within the general public that just simple crimes are going uninvestigated. I know I've had two or three bikes stolen in the last 12 months, and there's absolutely no point calling the police because once they find out you have insurance, they just give up on doing any investigation whatsoever. There just seems to be this low-level crime that impacts people almost weekly, that they just don't feel they can trust the police to investigate properly. And it's this sort of crime that really damages the government in election year if they feel that the police aren't doing the job that they're meant to be doing, and the Tories have been in power for the last 14 years.
Labour have implied that lots of people are turning to shoplifting because they can't afford to survive under the Tories. What do you make of that, Nigel?
Some of that is true. I mean, certainly some of the low-level stuff that Albie is talking about is because people are just desperate to get some food which they can't afford otherwise. But I don't think that's the main problem for shopkeepers at the moment. It's the organised gangs who go in and they create a disturbance in the store while a couple of others then go and sweep the shelves clean and they run off. I saw one of these a few weeks ago in my own local supermarket. And the problem then is if they know the police aren't going to investigate, they can carry on doing this with impunity, which comes back to our 2014 change that meant police didn't investigate under £200.
And what do we make of this story that's in the papers today, I think, the Robin Hood factor here, where you've got sort of like gangs of shoplifters, as you're saying, going in and stealing from the shops that are perceived to be more upmarket, like Marks and Spencer's, Waitrose, etc., taking food and then giving it to the food banks. What do you make of that one, Albie?
I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I don't know what is Robin Hood like about stealing from a supermarket, which whatever supermarket, whether it's upmarket, mid-market or down-market, they run on very tight and narrow margins, whether it is M&S, Waitrose or Aldi. It's a very tight margin business. Stealing from a business and then taking it to a food bank. There are lots of people up and down the United Kingdom that, out of the goodness of their hearts, will donate food that they buy to food banks. Those are the heroes that we should be talking about, not thieves who steal from what they perceive to be upmarket supermarkets and then take that to food banks.
What do you make of that, Nigel?
Yeah, I agree with every word of that. I mean, what you find is that in most supermarkets now, there will be a basket whereby you can put food in for your local food bank. So people can shop and they'll add an extra can of beans, say, to their shop and then drop it off. That's the way to do it. You don't go around stealing to hand them back to somebody else.
No, indeed. But Nigel, one thing, sticking with you, I mean, people living in Labour-run areas are actually 20% more likely to be a victim of shoplifting and 40% more likely to be a victim of crime. What do you think is going on there?
I think to substitute Labour areas for poorer areas, obviously that the poorer people are, the more likely they are to steal. So, I mean, that's not suggesting they are dishonest, but they're doing it out of necessity. So that's what you will find. Yes, and of course, those areas tend to be Labour areas, but I don't think you can blame Labour for that kind of problem.
And Albie, I mean, I kind of resent coming from a working class, fairly poor background, that just because you're poor, you think crime is an acceptable thing to do. You think going shoplifting is acceptable because I'm poor. What do you say to that?
I don't know that people who end up committing offences such as shoplifting, if they're from a very underprivileged background, think it's acceptable to shoplift. It is totally unacceptable to shoplift. But unfortunately, we do know, and this isn't just people who are thieves, but all across all crime, we do know that there are certain groups which are more overrepresented when it comes to crime than others because of issues, socioeconomic factors, hardship that they may be facing. Some people just have to turn to crime, and that is very unfortunate, which is why I'll repeat the Labour slogan, tough on crime, tough on the causes of crime. It's not just that we lock these people up and put them in prison or fine them or whatever. We've also got to crack down on what drives people to cause crime in the first place, and we'll have to wait and see what both parties' plans are on those as the manifestos come out before the general election.
Oh, yes, I'm sure they'll have or ambitions, as they call them these days, don't they? We have an ambition. It might happen, it might not, but it's an ambition that we will get this done. Nigel Nelson and Albie Amcomer, thank you. Albie, you're back later on, aren't you, with the Saturday 5? Marvellous. What time are you on?
6 o'clock.
Don't want to miss that one. Thank you both very much. Now, we move on. Now, don't miss your chance to win a £10,000 Greek cruise, a luxury travel bundle and a whopping £10,000 in tax-free cash. It's our biggest prize of the year so far, and here's how it could all be yours.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Oh, good luck. I tell you what, that beach night looked lovely, didn't it? I could be there right now. But I'm not. I'm here with you, and I'm glad you're keeping me company. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. The Duke of Sussex is under pressure to step down from the board of a conservation charity after new allegations of abuse carried out by its rangers have come to light. Join me after this very short break to find out what these allegations are and what is expected to happen. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Barbara has been riding horses here for the past 35 years. She's deaf, and these lessons are tailored especially to meet her needs. But soon she may need to find a new hobby. Under proposals to connect a wind farm off the Morecambe coast to a sub-power station in Preston, construction to link the two assets would meet the border of the riding school. If it goes ahead, the owner says the 3,000 lessons they offer each year for disabled riders like Barbara would have to be cancelled, and they would be forced to close their doors for good.
Horses are very sensitive creatures, so they're not as logical as us, and they don't understand words like there's going to be a loud noise in a minute. How is it allowed to happen? How are big companies allowed to do this?
One local resident, Andrew Lee, has lived here for 56 years. He runs the local post office, but says his true life's work is conservation.
I did a bird survey over the last 20 years on this ground, and it includes 100 species of birds. What they're going to do, they're going to wipe everything out. We're not saying no to the wind farm. What we're saying no to is the cable corridor. The cable corridor is going to cut Fylde in two.
In a statement to GB News, the developers said, "All feedback we have received has been considered to date and helped inform our design process. We understand there are local concerns and these will be addressed in due course." But for the area's local MP, he believes his constituents are being listened to, but not heard.
The thing that people really object to is this sense that they just have to suck it up. They just have to accept what's being done to them. And that is why we've done a parliamentary petition, because that's not how it works.
Sophie Reaper, GB News.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
this is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
we'll be there.
This is GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
The People's Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch, so please do keep them coming. Really easy to get in touch now. And we should be flashing up on the screen how you do it. No, we're not. OK, it'll be organised. Right, OK, Michael, There you go. That's how you get in touch. www.gbnews.com/your say. Someone said you don't say / anymore. It's just / Anyway, that's how you do it. So let us know your thoughts. Michael's already done so, and a lot of you get in touch about this, the police on the streets and how they approached that Jewish man for being obviously Jewish at a Palestinian march. Michael says, I have no respect for the police now. They seem to be very anti-British. Strong words. Meanwhile, Steve says, if the Jewish gentleman had been left to cross the road and been attacked, who would be blamed for that attack? The police, not the demonstrators. Police should not be apologising for carrying out their duty. It was just the way they said the way they said what they said, wasn't it? That I think, you know, it was anti-Semitic and it was offensive. Meanwhile, St George's Day, Paul says, I fear that it will soon be deemed offensive to wear my enamel St George and enamel poppy pin badges in this country. Well, I hope we never, ever get to that stage, and please God we won't. But St George's Day is coming up on Tuesday, and if you want to talk about that, www.gbnews.com. Your sleigh, /your say. See, get it right in the end. Now, let me know your thoughts on everything we're discussing in exactly that method. Or you can also do it at GB News, which is even simpler, isn't it? Now, let's talk about the royals, shall we? We do once a week. Prince Harry is likely to face pressure to step down from the board of an African conservation charity after new allegations of abuse carried out by its armed rangers has emerged. Prince Harry was the president of the organisation for 6 years before being promoted to the governing board of directors last year. Joining me now to explain more about this story is royal broadcaster and commentator Rafe Haydel-Mankoo. Rafe, thank you very much. Now, we normally talk about the usual royal experts. This is a different kind of story. What's going on with this one?
It's a different kind of story, and it's actually a rather disturbing story. This has all come to light through a new book called Entrepreneurs in the Wild, which is the result of 3 years of investigative research by a Dutch journalist into an organisation called African Parks, which was set up to stop poaching, which in itself you would think is a noble aim. This organisation is funded by billionaires in America, by celebrities, as you say. Prince Harry, for 6 years, was its president. He's now on its governing council, which means he's responsible for its policies and for managing the 22 different national parks in a dozen African countries that this organisation takes place in. But these allegations are that there was rape, torture and abuse by the rangers, who are local people who are paid by this organisation, well armed, and they are taught to treat poachers as the enemy, almost as if it's a war between the two sides. And some of the torture is quite horrific. They're hog-tied, these poachers, tied them from trees and hit them and done all sorts of stuff to extract information out of them. And it's all quite alarming. Now, of course, some people will say, oh, well, we don't have much sympathy for poachers. But actually, you know, when we think of poaching, we think of people killing elephants for tusks or rhinos for horns. But actually, in a lot of these cases, these are tribal communities who are simply doing what they've done for thousands of years, and that's hunt for food, warthogs or buffaloes, this sort of a thing. So it's actually also a case of a big sort of Western-funded organisation interfering with the traditional lifestyles of these communities as well. It's very concerning, and there are calls now for Prince Harry to step down. There's a separate investigation that's already being undertaken by this African Parks itself, following another organisation called, I think, Survival International, which also has brought up allegations of abuse and so forth. Now, they're currently denying all of the allegations in this book. They say that this book is actually poorly written and researched, and the sources are unreliable. But it is actually quite an issue for Prince Harry, who, of course, has made conservation such an important part of his mission in life. But also, he's very concerned also with people in Africa, and so there's a conflict here.
And the conflict, it is actually quite an interesting book, and this chap is a well-respected Dutch author, isn't he? It's not just knocked together. And it's an aggressive, militarised approach to protecting wildlife is instilled from the start by instructors who are usually white and from very wealthy Western countries. So given how Harry himself feels about racism, indeed he's accused his family of being racist, this is something that he really does need to look into a bit more, doesn't he?
Well, you'll remember the big controversy around comic relief, for example, when they said, oh, well, we can't have white saviours coming over to Africa, you know, but, you know, the Richard Curtises of the world and Rowan Atkinsons. So if that is wrong, then how is this any different, where you have people who are Dutch and European and American American going over there and doing precisely the same thing, but in terms of conservation. Now, personally, I don't think it's an issue at all myself, but I mean, if you're going to have this policy or if you're going to have this mindset, you would seem to think that it would need to be applied over here. And it's also, there are some very odd way that this thing is structured. It's done almost with bonuses and incentives for rangers to actually enter into armed conflict, because if they have armed conflict with poachers, they get bonuses. If they take their meat or their weapons away from them, they have bonuses. So the incentive is there for the rangers to actually seek confrontation.
It does seem very dubious, doesn't it? So basically, I mean, very quickly running out of time, but should Harry just now cut ties with this organisation? It does sound a bit...
Well, I think everyone should wait for the investigation to finish, but certainly if I was Prince Harry and knowing his image, I think, yes, he'd be wise to at least take a back seat for a while.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, other things going on. He's got some jam making to be getting on with or something, hasn't he? Rafe, thank you.
Busy man.
Very busy. All that jam to make. Rafe Habermanku, thank you very much
so much
for joining us this afternoon. Appreciate your time. Now, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Saturday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show for you. But first, it's time for the news headlines with Cameron.
Dawn, thank you. It's 1:31. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. The Metropolitan Police has had to apologise for an earlier apology over a comment made to an anti-Semitism campaigner. Gideon Falter was stopped from crossing a road near a pro-Palestine march in London after an officer described him as openly Jewish. An initial apology from the force caused offence for suggesting opponents must know their presence is provocative. The Home Office, which has described the incident as unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and the Mayor of London. Pro-Israel demonstrators are now holding a peaceful counter-protest in central London called Enough is Enough. The group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital. Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters have been marching in Sheffield demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. They're accusing Israel of using famine as a weapon of war and criticise the government for continuing to arm the country. The Palestine Solidarity Campaign also took aim at Barclays Bank, urging it to sever ties with companies which supply weapons and military equipment to Israel. A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. Hundreds of Army and Naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London earlier to mark 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much, Cameron. And remember to let me know your thoughts on all the stories we're discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation. Or message me on our socials, really simple, @GBNews. And there's loads more coming up on today's show for you. Thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow, calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond, though? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate our weather, bringing some warm sunshine for some of us. However, there will also be some patchy cloud. Low pressure remains never too far away out towards the north of the UK, but this large area of high pressure dominates our weather through the rest of the weekend. This will bring some warm sunshine, particularly for Wales, southwestern parts of England and Northern Ireland as well. However, there will be some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland that slowly spills its way southwards as we go through Saturday afternoon. Perhaps a few more breaks than the graphics are showing, so there could be some brighter spells in places. And it will be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs in the south of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees, but definitely feeling a little chillier under that cloud across parts of Scotland. Into Saturday evening, there will still be those clear spells around, but some patchy rain does arrive across northern parts of Scotland and slowly sinks its way southwards as we go into the early hours of Sunday morning. Some clear spells across eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland and western Scotland as well, and turning chilly under those clear skies, although temperatures holding up well above zero under all that cloud. Into the start of Sunday, after a chilly start under those clear skies, it will be quite a bright start, particularly for southern and eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, seeing some sunshine through the morning. However, that patchy rain across Scotland slowly sinks its way southwards into northern parts of England, so bringing quite a grey day here. In the sunshine, though, still feeling warm again, highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the south and around 9 or 10 degrees under that cloud.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News.
GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task. This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers. I agree. And that's precisely what I'll get. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, a pro-Israel protest has been organised today in central London by activist group Enough is Enough. The group says the protest aims to be peaceful and non-provocative, reclaiming London as the bastion of democracy and multiculturalism. And hallelujah to that one, eh? Joining me now from the protest is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Hello, Catherine. Again, Catherine, bring us up to speed on what's happening where you are now.
Yes, good afternoon again, Dawn. Well, just in the last 3 or 4 minutes, this protest by Enough is Enough has started to wrap up. They sang the national anthem. There's been a lot of singing and really quite an upbeat atmosphere here from this group. They are here really to say we will not be cowed by the marches, by feel that they're not able to go onto the streets of London. Members of the Jewish community and pro-Israel supporters, they feel that over weeks and weeks and weeks, the pro-Palestine protests that we've seen since October the 7th and those atrocities committed by Hamas, the numbers of people at these marches have been so great that increasingly Jewish people have felt not safe to be in central London. I spoke to a couple of them earlier. Let's take a look back at what they had to say.
It's just sad that it's come to this, that it's now regarded as not completely safe for Jewish people to walk in the streets of their own city. And not only is it distressing and vile as their views are, the distressing thing is also becoming normalised.
Can't walk through central London with a yarmulke on your head, no signs of any Israeli flag or support for Israel or any views on what may be going on in the Middle East. But if you're not allowed to walk across the streets in central London because you are openly Jewish, then it's time for the government to act.
That, of course, is a reaction to the news all over the papers today that a police officer at a previous pro-Palestine protest said to a Jewish man, basically, you need to go away because you're being provocative and this is not safe for you. There's been a lot of condemnation of that, but I have to say it is very difficult for the police. They later said to this man too, there's simply so many people that we cannot guarantee your safety if you are attacked. But what a state of affairs that Jewish people feel that they can't come into the capital city because they simply feel they're not safe. But today that is not the case, because we've seen dozens of people behind me coming out and saying, no, this is not okay. We will stand and be counted. calling for the release of the hostages. I was talking to a lady who said her daughter had very nearly become one of them back on October the 7th. Of course, dozens of hostages still missing in Gaza. Also signs saying free Palestine from Hamas and free the hostages. So quite different today to the pro-Palestine marches. We had a smaller group of pro-Palestine supporters on the other side. They have wrapped up and gone home today. The pro-Israel voices being heard here in London.
Catherine, that was just a stationary protest, wasn't it? It thankfully seemed, very peaceful and getting their point across in a sensible way. Is there actually a pro-Palestinian march in London today as well?
No, I don't believe so, although I believe there'll be another big national march for Palestine, I think, next weekend. And they do happen frequently, and they're massively, difficult for the police, and they take large numbers of police to resource. But, I can't see any end to this, because until the situation in Gaza is resolved, the figures of people who've died, estimated now are over 30,000. Until there is a meaningful ceasefire, it's difficult to see things changing. But, it's a war happening a long way away, but it's having very real consequences on the streets of Britain and around the world. A lot of division, a lot of hatred, and of course, ultimately, people on both sides want the killing to stop, but both have rather different focuses.
Indeed. Catherine Forster, live from the pro-Israel gathering today in central London. Thank you very much, Catherine. Now, we move to another protest. This is in Scotland. Thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow today. The organisers, Believe in Scotland, say the event will be about sharing their positive vision for an independent Scotland, with First Minister Humza Yousaf expected to speak later today. Joining me now is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, certainly we are here. Hello, how are you? We're in George Square just now, and interestingly, the march hasn't even arrived here yet. We left it over in the West End of Glasgow, and then over this way, here we are in George Square, and already there's a good, 500 people here to combine with the people in the march. And indeed, we see the stage here just over my shoulder. That's where a lot of today's speakers are going to be discussing, and of course, Humza Yousaf here hoping to end something of an upsetting week for him and the party and the government, on a high today in front of thousands of independence supporters here in Glasgow. Glasgow, of course, was one of the highest kind of regions to support independence back in 2014. But today's march from Believe in Scotland and Pensioners for Independence, well, they are on the way over from West End, and in the middle of them is also a pro-Palestine march, of course, and because today the police can only stretch themselves quite so far in Glasgow, then they've integrated somewhat with this pro-independence march. The feeling here, of course, matching the weather. Everybody's quite bright and quite jubilant. We're still a good while away from hearing some of the speeches, but if I just have a little walk over in this direction, then perhaps at the other side of the monument behind me, you can actually see the counter-protest, and that's been also organised today. Now, this isn't actually a protest for independence. This is still the ongoing hate crime act, the discussions, the debate, and lots of people obviously still quite unhappy with how everything's turned out with the hate crime act. That, along with Peter Murrell's arrest, and then of course threats from the Green Party to split from the coalition. Quite a difficult week, as we said, for Humza Yousaf, but hopefully today he'll get a little more wind in his sails for him.
Tony, I was just going to say, with all the developments that we've seen recently with the hate crime bill, which you say is incredibly divisive all over the United Kingdom, and obviously the recent developments with Peter Murrell, how has that affected support for the SNP?
I think it's safe to say that, that's taken a bit of a dip. To kind of throw back a little further, I always like to go back to that Scotland's first recall by-election for Rutherglen. Now, SNP got absolutely stomped in that by-election, and Humza Yousaf came out and said that that was no doubt in due part to the GRR bill this time last year and the furore around that in Section 35. So I'm left, and many Scots I imagine are left wondering, the way that this has started, this second year of his tenure, then what impact is that going to have in this general election and on independence? Dawn mentioned to me earlier on that the age demographic was quite old here. I think we have to take into consideration this is a march by pensioners for independence, but seemingly there always seems to be that solid third that's not going to change their mind, that they are solid for independence, but that crucial third that's in the middle, they're the ones that would decide any future vote one way or another.
Tony, thank you very much. That's Tony Maguire in Glasgow on the Scottish independence march, where Humza Yousaf is due to speak this afternoon, and Tony will be keeping us up to date on what's happening there. Now, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. New research shows that Gen Z is increasingly finding the Great British Fry-Up too fatty, or is it too time-consuming? Or just too lazy, basically. I'm asking, will Generation Woke kill off our fry-ups? All of that and much more to come with GB News, Britain's news channel, coming back later with sausages.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about Sebastian? It really amazes me how a mother who can lose a child in such a shocking and unexpected way, so little, so precious, can then turn that grief into something so positive. How did you find the strength to get up, get a camera crew, as you say, travel to the other side of the world and investigate all of this?
I was angry at Sebastian for dying. You know, you feel like saying, God, 32 years later, and I can still get very, very upset about it. I was angry that something that while he was born and lived with me and slept and then died, they were actively campaigning in New Zealand to try and stop this happening because they had a very high cot death rate there. They had the lady, the Anne Diamond, if you like, of New Zealand, a television presenter called Judy Bailey, went on telly every night and said, if you're just about to put your baby down to sleep, put him on his or her back, not the tummy, and this will help. And their cot death rate plummeted. And I went out to New Zealand and met her, and it was anger that drove me to come back and demand that we have the same advert here, the same campaign. And of course, I got all this complete nonsense from the Department of Health saying, you know, oh, young mothers do not watch television, I was told. In other words, while New Zealand mums were being told how to save their babies' lives, we actively denied British mums that advice during the time that Sebastian and others were dying.
And the other point, I suppose, to make is it's helpful to educate all generations, because when I had my babies, my mum would say, oh, he's not settling, just stick him on his tummy, he'll be much happier. That's what we did with you. And we had to say, well, things have changed, and, you know, but it's about educating everybody, because it's not just the mums that get their hands on the babies.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together. For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, lots of you have been getting in touch, sending your thoughts, which are now sitting on my phone, which keeps turning itself. It's one of those technical days for me, I'm afraid. Meanwhile, I love this one. This is Robert. Hi, Robert. Hope you're having a lovely time. Dawn is one of the best presenters on this channel. She is fair, coherent, down-to-earth and funny. Robert, probably time to step away from the beer, lovely. Meanwhile, on shoplifting, Anton says, before supermarkets stained our civilization, shop customers were served by the shopkeeper who kept his stock and all his staff behind a counter. You would ask for what you wanted and the shop would provide it. You did not help yourself, simple. Actually, blimey, I don't know how far you're going back, but I kind of remember that. And Anton, one of my pet hates is those self-service things. I mean, even if you don't intend shoplifting, it's really difficult to sort of like get it all scanned all properly, isn't it? I mean, so many people, I bet, have been tempted by that, not even deliberately meaning to shoplift. Any case, do keep all your messages coming in. www.gbnews.com/your say. I'm not a tech bod, you can tell, can't you? Let me know what your thoughts on that story, everything else we are talking about today. And you can join in the conversation on our socials at GB News. Now, should we talk bangers, shall we? Nice bit of sausage in the afternoon on Saturday. The future of the Great British Fry-Up is on the ropes, or you could say had its chips. See what I did there? Anyway, new research shows that Gen Z, or Z, is increasingly finding the British classic too fatty or too time-consuming to put together, with 4 in 10 18 to 35-year-olds worrying that the meal is too fatty or greasy, and 10% never, ever having had a full British English breakfast. Joining me now is former presenter of Fat Families, Steve Miller. Hello, Steve. Good to see you again. Steve, what do you make of this story? I mean, are they genuinely health conscious, or are they just too lazy to be able to cooking a full English?
I think it's a bit of both, really. But I do think a lot of Gen Z, there is a portion of Gen Z, it's not all, I don't want to stereotype, that do suffer with can't be bothered itis. So they probably get up in the morning and whenever and think to themselves, you know, it's not just the cooking of it and getting all the ingredients together. And by the way, there's about 900 calories in the full English, so we do have to be a bit cautious. But I think they're also probably a bit worried about the washing up. So I reckon quite a lot of them eat it out, actually. Having said that, you know, there's been a lot of education around about food over the last sort of 10, 15, 20 years. So maybe more people, you know, the younger set are more health conscious. And they do see the social media influences online, you see, talking about what food is good or bad. Listen, let me be clear. No food is good or bad. It's the control we have over it. I love a full English. Went out for Prosecco last night, and I tell you what, it's mopped it up this morning beautifully. There's nothing like a sassy sausage on my plate. I'm telling you, I love it.
Who doesn't like a fatty sausage? But, I mean, the thing is, Steve, I would believe you about the fact that they're all getting a bit health conscious if it wasn't for this generation and also keeping the fast food industry on our high streets absolutely booming. Not you and me, is it, going and eating at all the fast food chicken shops?
No, but I mean, I do go in the fast food shops at times. I've always said, you know, you shouldn't deny yourself a bit of what you enjoy. But having said that, if you are too fat and the scales are going north, the readings going north, then you do have to do a bit of self-assessment and start saying to yourself, OK, let's look back at the last couple of weeks, what I've been scoffing, and make some adjustments and be mentally controlled about those adjustments and have some sense of discipline on those adjustments as well. Unfortunately, in this country, we're very soft on fat now because, you know, if we say, well, I mean, I actually think on menus we should have, if you're fat, think before ordering as a warning. But of course, everyone jumps up in the air and say, oh, that's fat shaming, you couldn't do that. Well, I tell you, unfortunately, in the UK, we've got too many little piggies going to the market.
Right. Steve, thank you very much. You've just put me off eating for the rest of the day now. Everything in moderation, people. That's Steve Miller, former presenter, Fat Families. Thank you very much for joining me with some interesting advice. I'm Dawn Neeson. I'm not eating for the rest of the day now. It's GB News Saturday. There's lots more coming up on today's show. But first, it's the weather with Ellie.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate, but it will be feeling a little chillier along some eastern coasts. The area of high pressure situated across the UK does bring a bit of a northeasterly breeze, so some chillier conditions, but plenty of dry weather around due to that area of high pressure. So some late afternoon and evening sunshine for some of us. However, some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland will bring some outbreaks of patchy rain, particularly for northern parts of Scotland, slowly sinking its way southwards into the early hours of the morning. Southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland holding on to those clearer skies and turning quite chilly there, however remaining frost-free under that cloud and patchy rain. So for eastern parts of Scotland, a bit of a cloudy and grey and damp start to the day on Sunday. However, southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine through the morning. Perhaps one or two showers bubbling up across southeastern parts of England through the afternoon, but it should be staying dry for most places. However, that band of patchy rain slowly continues to sink its way southwards and feeling quite chilly under that cloud and rain too. However, in the sunshine, feeling very pleasant, highs of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees across the south. Monday does start a bit of a greyer day for most of us. Outbreaks of rain continue to slowly push their way southwards, but southeastern parts of England probably holding on to that sunshine and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine too. Maybe one or two showers around on Tuesday or Wednesday, but temperatures will be slowly recovering closer to average for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Thank you very much, Ellie. And there's lots more coming up on today's show. The Tories are reportedly considering cutting stamp duty in the autumn statement this year. But will it be enough to save Rishi Sunak's bacon? All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far. Time to put the kettle on, though. See you soon.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest prize so far. There's an incredible £10,000 in tax-free cash to spend however you like. Plus, courtesy of Variety Cruises, a bespoke 7-night small boat cruise for two worth £10,000. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, your next holiday could be on us. Choose any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and find your home at sea. We'll also send you packing with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
GB News is the home of free speech. We were created to champion it, and we deliver it day in, day out.
Free speech allows us all to explore and debate openly the issues most important to us, our families, and of course, the British people.
Having challenging conversations to enlighten each other.
Which is why we hear all sides of the argument.
We are the People's Channel.
We will always stand by the freedom to express yourself.
On TV, radio and online.
This is GB News,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, every Sunday at 9:30 when I'll be interviewing the key players in British politics and taking them to task.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial.
With an upcoming election looming over Westminster, now is the time for clear, honest answers.
I agree.
And that's precisely what I'll get.
Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's election channel.
Hello and welcome to GB News Saturday. I'm Dawn Neeson. For the next hour, I'll be keeping you company on telly, online and on digital radio, keeping you up to date on all the stories that really matter to you. Coming up this hour, everyday problems are no excuse not to find work. Those are the words of our Prime Minister. He says people with mild mental health conditions should be given help to stay in employment. Is he right, though? Then the world waits with bated breath after an Israeli missile hit Iran. International leaders call for calm as Iran official says no plan for immediate retaliation. Bringing the latest on what's happening there. And thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow, calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond to this one? This show is nothing without you and your views. That's not about me waffling on, it's about you. Let me know your thoughts on all the stories we'll be discussing today by visiting gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation, or message me on our socials at GB News. That's simpler. But first, here's the news with the very lovely Cameron Walker.
Good afternoon. It's 2:01. I'm Cameron Walker in the GB newsroom. A Metropolitan Police apology has been welcomed by the government, but the Home Office says being Jewish should never be seen as provocative. It's after an officer stopped Campaign Against Anti-Semitism Chief Executive Gideon Falter from crossing a road near a pro-Palestinian march, saying he's quite openly Jewish. The Home Office, which says the comment is unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and the Mayor of London. A spokesperson for Sadiq Khan describes the Met's handling of the incident as concerning. Today, pro-Israel demonstrators are holding a peaceful counter-protest in central London. Called Enough is Enough, the group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital.
You can't walk through central London with a yarmulke on your head, no signs of any Israeli flag or support for Israel or any views on what may be going on in the Middle East. But if you're not allowed to walk across the streets in central London because you are openly Jewish, then it's time for the government to act.
It's just sad that it's come to this, that it's now regarded as not completely safe for Jewish people to walk in the streets of their own city. And not only is it distressing and vile as their views are, the distressing thing is also becoming normalised.
Meanwhile, pro-Palestinian protesters have been marching in Sheffield demanding a ceasefire in Gaza. They're accusing Israel of using famine as a weapon of war and criticise the government for continuing to arm the country. The Palestinian Solidarity Campaign also took aim at Barclays Bank, urging it to sever ties with companies which supplies weapons and military equipment to Israel. 3 men who died in a car crash near a retail park in northwest London have been named by police. Mohammed Zadani, Mohammed Ghazi and Zahail Zulfikar died when their vehicle went through a car park fence and hit a footbridge. It happened last weekend, and the men, who were in their early 20s, were pronounced dead at the scene. 2 other passengers were injured, but police say their condition is not life-threatening. Investigations into the cause of the crash continue. Fire has caused significant damage to a historic pub in southwest London. Thick black smoke was seen rising from the Grade 2 listed building in Mitcham. 80 firefighters battled the blaze, which ripped through 3 floors and destroyed the roof of the derelict property. 4 men were treated at the scene. The cause of the fire is being investigated. Parents and their children have staged a demonstration in Belfast over rising childcare costs. More than 1,000 people carrying balloon placards and prams took part, calling for immediate support. Unlike England, there's no scheme offering free childcare in Northern Ireland, but some tax credits are available. Stormont politicians want to prioritise childcare, but a new strategy could cost £400 million a year. They've requested face-to-face talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to ask for more funding. A man who set himself alight outside the New York court where former President Donald Trump's hush money trial is being held has died. Maxwell Azzarello was taken to hospital in a critical condition and later died from his injuries. Witnesses say he pulled pamphlets with conspiracy theories out of a backpack, then threw them in the air before dousing himself with flammable liquid. Police say he did not appear to be targeting Trump or others involved in the trial. The former president's campaign has released a statement offering its condolences. Witness Fred Gates described what happened.
I was skeptical at first. I thought it was a gag, like he was I didn't think he was gonna actually light himself on fire. But when it seemed like he had real purpose, everybody started to run away from him. And then that's when he went up.
A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who died serving the nation. Hundreds of Army and Naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London, marking 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. Some members of the public were there to celebrate the day.
Well, we're big military people, so it means a lot to come down and celebrate and be part of it all, really.
It's obviously the patron saint of our country, and obviously I'm the old brigade, and it means something to me.
We're English. He's a patron saint of England, so we've got to mark it. Scotland do it, Wales do it. We've got to do it as well, and we've got to do it bigger and better.
For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Dawn, GB News Saturday.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Right, let's get straight into today's story, shall we? It's been reported that Rishi Sunak is eyeing up a summer election. Or is he? The Tories are also reportedly considering cutting stamp duty in the autumn statement this year. The plans were considered for the spring budget, but rejected in favour of cuts to national insurance. I don't understand what's going on. Hopefully, GB News senior political commentator Nigel Nelson does. Nigel, every week we have this chat. There's another story. This week it is, cuts to stamp duty. What's going on?
I think that Rishi Sunak is basing his chances of winning an election on tax cuts, and so this is just the latest one that they're thinking of. They were going to try and cut stamp duty in the spring budget and decided against that in favour of another national insurance cut. Now what they're doing is eyeing up the autumn statement, which should be due in September, to see if they can cut stamp duty. So what that would mean is the threshold for paying it going up from 250,000 to 300,000, which would cost a whacking £3 billion.
But I'm a bit confused because there's also talk from Westminster coming out that the election may be now in the summer, especially if we ever get a plane off to Rwanda. So how can... They're either very, very optimistic, very, very confused, or think we're very stupid. So election June, autumn?
Well, I mean, there are Tories who are pushing for an early election, and there have been for some time. I mean, Rishi Sunak was even thinking of going on May the 2nd when the local elections were going to be held, but the polls didn't move, so he decided against that. What he's pinning his hopes on, really, is going long, so you're looking at October or November, in the hope that the economy will have improved, and there will be slight improvements. Inflation is coming down. It looks like interest rates should come down over the summer. The problem is they still can't tackle the problem with thresholds, which means that 7 million people are either paying tax for the first time or paying more tax.
But rock and a hard place doesn't even come close to this, right? Wednesday surveyed more than 5,400 voters, found that support for the Conservative Party is at rock bottom. 45% of voters still don't want a Labour government, though. A substantial number of people agree that Labour will be worse for Britain than the Tories. I mean, it doesn't matter when they hold this election, does it? I mean, a lot of us will be getting to the polls and going, huh? What do we do? Why isn't there a box that says anyone but any of these lot?
Well, there sort of is. I mean, what you can do is go along to the polling station and spoil your ballot paper. And if you'd like to write a rude message to your local politician, you can put that on the ballot paper too. And all spoilt ballot papers are looked at by the candidates, so you know your message will get through. If you do that, at least it shows you're not complacent. You're not simply sitting at home watching the telly. You're actually going out there to cast a vote, even if you don't actually want any of those people on the ballot paper. But you're right, at the moment that it is a difficult one. That latest poll you're talking about was by Lord Ashcroft. Although 45% of people weren't enthusiastic about Labour, if you turn that poll the other way round, more than 50% were and would prefer Labour to the Tories. So at the moment, it looks almost certain that Labour will get a majority in the election. Quite how much we'll have to see. I don't think the Tories will be wiped out, as the polls suggest.
Is Angela Rayner a problem for them?
It's not a good look. I mean, no one wants to be investigated by the police, which is what Angela Rayner is facing. I don't think it'll actually make a huge difference in the polls. And what she said is, if she's convicted of a criminal offence, that she will quit. I think that would be a pity, but we'll have to wait for the outcome of the police investigation to see where this one goes next.
Meanwhile, it's a game of ping pong, not just Rwanda, but with the amount of sort of like controversies, I think is the polite way of putting it, going on. We have Angela Rayner, and then we have at least 2 Conservative MPs caught up in controversy, let's put it that way, over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the sort of tit for tat between the Labour and Tories are coming in. So the Tories are reporting Angela Rayner to the police. Now Labour want the police to investigate Mark Menzies for the extraordinary allegations that we have against him. It does make Westminster look a bit sort of sleazy, I admit. I think that one of the problems is politicians tend to be by their very nature risk takers, and so you get these things coming up more often than you would in normal life.
All this programme, Nigel, I've had to stop myself saying Pestminster rather than Westminster, and it's just old school tabloid, but it's just really stuck in my head. Nigel Nelson, thank you very much for trying, kind of in vain, to explain what the hell's going on Planet Politics. Nigel, thank you very much for joining us. Now, for all the best analysis, even better than Nigel's, and opinion on that story more, go to our website, which is at gbnews.com. Now that we stay with politics, the Prime Minister has unveiled plans to crack down on what he calls sick note culture in Britain if he wins the election. Sunak says his moral mission to reform our welfare system, saying that work is good for people. Well, he has faced criticism from a disability charity and the British Medical Association, but has rejected claims that his reforms were lacking in compassion. Ooh, this is a divisive one as well, isn't it? Joining me now is GB News host of the Saturday 5, Darren Grimes, and the very lovely former Labour advisor and writer, Scarlett Maguire. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Fierce debate with these two. Always a great pairing. Now, Scarlett, Rishi Sunak has been accused of being a bit heartless with this policy about you're all lazy, get back to work, mental health isn't that bad.
Well, I worry about this thing is that on the one hand, the Daily Mail...
Are you anxious? Do you need a second?
On the one hand, the Daily Mail has a story about how somebody managed to get 2 sick notes by paying for them, right? And this wasn't from a GP, right? This is just... And there are scams, and there's no question, and you need to close the scams down. But actually... the problem with mental illness is, of course, you can pull the you pull the wool over people's eyes, and you can pretend to have it. Not that I think being on unemployment benefit is anything great. I mean, you don't get very much money. You spend your whole time going in and out to the job centre as they try and find you jobs. But there is no... But there are an awful lot of people, and I remember the last time the Conservatives did this, and I met a friend of mine who has had serious mental problems. I mean, you just look at her and you know, and she said, I think I'm going to have to go to work. She's never worked in her life, right? And I said to her, don't worry, you know, you'll be fine. Your sister will sort it out. Because also, she couldn't have sorted it out. And so the problem is that if you have GPs doing it, you have GPs who actually understand things. And these people that the government are going to hire will obviously be trying to send people back to work. That's their job. And it's very, very difficult. And actually, let's get rid of the scams, but let's think very hard about people who are unemployed.
Darren, I mean, the sickness benefits bill is 50 billion. It's set to rise to 20 billion. We have 2.8 million people on long-term sickness in this country. Rishi has to do something. Is this the right thing to do, though?
Look, I want to say from the outset that I'm certainly not opposed to any form of welfare state. You know, my mum brought us up 3 kids on our own, and she was a recipient of that despite working all her life. And that's the preface. I think the British people are fundamentally a fair people, but I think actually they'd like to say we'll help people who are in work, but you should actually make the effort to go to work if you're in a position to do so. I just don't buy that there are, 9 million people out of work right now who could be at work. Some of them, of course, will be collecting disability benefits who won't be able to go to work. But we now class personal independence payments for those who say, oh, I've got a bit of an anxiety, oh, I'm a bit depressed at the minute. Suck it up, buttercup. Many of us suffer anxiety and a bit of depression now and again. But life, I'm afraid, is unfair. You've got to go out and work. We cannot be a country that basically, since the pandemic, has seen millions more added to that bill, a bill that is going to go up and up and up, and just shrug our shoulders and say, well, it's absolutely fair. It is not fair on those who go out, earn minimum wage, for those to sit on their backsides, frankly, who game the system. We had one TikTok video that I saw last night, Dawn, where some fella from India was trying to tout his trade, which was to say to the Department of Work and Pensions that you suffer from snoring and therefore you can't get the required sleep you need in order to actually work and get a job. And this is happening throughout the system. It's being gamed utterly and completely.
Do you think, I mean, Scarlett, obviously your friend, and there are lots of people, no one is downplaying serious mental illness here at all, but there is a bit of a suspicion that lots of people now, certainly the younger generation, no respect, don't disrespect Darren, but that are maybe a bit too wrapped up in cotton wool, and the stuff that older generations roll their sleeves up and get on with, they're going, I can't go into work today.
Yeah, so what you've got to do is you've got to say, so who is it who's giving these sick notes out? And what the GPs say is, we do know. We know the difference between somebody who's going, I'm having a bit of a problem, and look, I've had a complete breakdown. And it certainly happens. And I mean, I actually think, I think it's not even a matter of, you know, people should go out to work while other people are on their backside. I actually think that work is good for most people.
Yeah,
right?
it is,
I mean,
yeah.
I think that work, it should earn you more money, right? And I think it should get you places and it should get you pleasure. I mean, there are unquestionably toxic workplaces where actually, I mean, I know too many instances of bullying where people had to leave. They did get other jobs, they didn't go on the dole, but actually they really, really suffered. And there are places that are very bad for you. I think the thing is that what Rishi Sunak is saying is, I don't trust GPs. And what the British Medical Association is saying, actually, we know about these things. And if you have people who are not doctors who are saying, well, you know, I don't think this is good enough.
Well,
I mean, I remember the days when it was, well, you can walk 10 paces, therefore you can get to work. I mean, that's the problem.
But there are in the Daily Mail today, there are doctors being interviewed who are saying they're too scared to say no to actually signing people off on the sick in case someone turns around and says, well, I'm going to harm myself or something else, and therefore it gets blamed on that doctor. We have a culture now which actually puts the onus on doctors to sign these things willy-nilly, to say, oh, you poor soul, a bit sad today, we'll sign you off on the sick. And I'm afraid that we cannot afford, we are not a rich country like we used to be. We are increasingly a middling country that cannot afford to basically have millions of people on out-of-work benefits who don't need to be. We've got to actually get back to basics and say, well, I'm afraid it's tough luck. We cannot continue like this. It's completely unsustainable.
But
we're barely going on, Scarlett, like we're a lockdown economy still. People on furlough. That's what we're basically treating people like that. We can't go on forever like that.
But actually, the thing about Darren is you don't know. You don't know whether doctors are just signing people off. You don't know whether. I mean, the whole point is, and being somewhat older than you, I have seen this thing, is every time a government's in trouble, they go, oh, and we're going to cut welfare. And actually, you always hit the people. I mean, it's like you go, well, you know, everybody has backache. I mean, the problem is, one of the reasons there's such thing is because the waiting list, the hospital waiting list means that people are not working because they're waiting to be cured, right? And when you've got, you know, a knee or a hip thing and you end up not being able to walk, then everything gets worse and worse and worse, and you end up...
Yeah, but that's a different kettle of fish of someone turning around and saying, actually, I'm a bit upset because we're a country of far-right fascists or something as ridiculous as that, and I need to therefore... Or climate change.
How often does that happen?
Well,
I mean, what I'm saying to you is...
Far too often.
Well,
snoring, I mean, snoring, come on. The system is gamed like you wouldn't believe.
How many people are claiming benefits because they snore?
Well, you wouldn't be able to actually, you wouldn't be able to quantify that.
But that's the problem, is I think we have these urban myths and then we have real people who actually really would like to get to work. And the other thing is, he says, is all these part-timers are going to be pushed into more work. And that's, a lot of those people are going to be mums.
Well, what I would say, though, Scarlett, is that I think you on the socialist left are far too relaxed about people being subservient to the state. And I think that's the problem, that actually you quite like that. I want people to be empowered in their own lives.
I began this by saying, I believe in work, right? And I believe that
So let's get people back to work, then.
I believe that work, but I just think we have to do it. We have to do it properly and actually have GPs doing it and not people hired to try and get people back to
believe
work.
in work as well, which is why I want to keep employed and cause you enormous stress by shutting you up. You're too good at this game. Thank you very much. Scarlett Maguire, former Labour advisor, thank you very much. And Darren, you're back tonight.
Yes, 6 o'clock.
On the
Saturday 5, yes,
Brilliant.
indeed.
That's a good one. Don't want to miss that one. Right, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
They're brilliant, aren't they? Now, OK, we are going to... we're going to cheer you all up. If you're suffering from mental health, feeling a bit fed up, this will cheer you up. Your chance to win a £10,000 Greek cruise, a luxury travel bundle and a whopping £10,000 in tax-free cash is our biggest prize of the year so far, and here's how it could all be yours.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for two. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text WIN to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, They're still with me, and we're all saying, we really want to be on that beach now with that lovely bit of blue water. And he goes, but we can't enter, you can, so do it. I'm Dawn Neeson, this is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. The world waits with bated breaths after an Israeli missile hit Iran. International leaders call for calm as Iran official says no plan for immediate retaliation. Sounds good news, doesn't it? Well, we'll bring you the latest on that. All of that and much more coming up. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Put the kettle on, but don't go too far.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
SUV drivers in Oxford will face higher parking charges, proposals tabled by the local Green Party or passed by the City Council. The motion argues that heavier cars like SUVs cause more damage to roads, are more likely to seriously injure or kill pedestrians, and cause more illnesses due to pollution. However, the Alliance of British Drivers has condemned the plan as absolutely outrageous. Well, let's get the thoughts now of the legendary motoring journalist, Quentin Wilson. Quentin, welcome to the show. Always a pleasure. We hear a lot about the war on motorists, this time targeting SUVs because of their weight, and the charges could be astronomical. This idea first started in Paris. Now it's coming to Oxford. Can you tell us a bit about how it would work?
OK, so the idea is that the charges will penalise people who drive heavier SUVs and I guess by implication electric cars, although Oxford Council haven't said exactly what they're going to do with EVs. But this is all based around this notion of SUVs being heavier than passenger cars, therefore wearing out the roads more. Now, there was a study, I've got it here in front of me, from the University of Edinburgh in 2022 that said real-world tests found that overwhelmingly the wear is caused by large vehicles, buses, heavy good vehicles. Road wear from cars and motorcycles is so low that this is immaterial. Now, obviously, driving around a medieval city like Oxford in an SUV isn't the brightest thing in the world to do. But the idea that we should penalise the owners of these cars based on imperfect science that's been read on social media, I think is completely wrong.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your TV, online and on digital radio. Now, we have to talk about it. It's developing all the time, isn't it still? US officials have said that Israeli missiles struck Iran. The attacks reportedly hitting an area home to a large airbase and major missile production complex and several nuclear facilities. Although the location of the strikes has not been fully confirmed, local sources are suggesting that 3 explosions were heard near the Isfahan airbase. Joining me now to bring us up to date on what is indeed happening in the Middle East, because I think Iraq got involved overnight as well, is former senior military intelligence officer Philip Ingram. Philip, lovely to see you again. Thank you very much for joining me. Philip, I was just about getting my head around what happened to the Iran-Israel thing, well, as much as anyone knows what happened, and getting a little bit hopeful about maybe both sides were just sort of like showing off a bit, but not really causing much harm. But there seems to have been something happening in Iraq as well. I mean, there's an explosion in Iraq overnight?
There is an explosion that's an Iraqi base
which seems to have damaged some of their military capability and some capability that was used by other groupings. Again, it's unsure whether it was an accident or whether it was one of the Iranian-backed groups attacking into that and all the rest of it. But there were a number of people killed and a number of people injured. Like everything in the Middle East, it's taking time for the real detail to come out. We are breathing a sigh of relief over what seems to be happening with Iran, because Iran's attack on Israel was unprecedented and was massive, and Israel's response seems to be a bit of a pinprick compared to it.
So is this, I mean, yeah, from Israel's standpoint, it's like, you know, they've sent the message, you know, you are vulnerable, we can get to you, but we're choosing not to. Meanwhile, Iran, there's an information fog, isn't there, I think it's fair to say, about what actually happened. But the way they're handling it, it kind of allows them to shrug it off without it all getting completely out of hand again. Is that how I should be feeling, do you think? And is that quite positive?
Yeah, it's as much a face-saving exercise as anything. You know, Benjamin Netanyahu is having to save face in the Israeli parliament. You know, his extreme right-wing elements wanted a robust response because this is the first time that Iran has directly attacked Israel, and you know, 331 drones, missiles, and all the rest of it attacking in is unprecedented. It's only because of the international support and the very sophisticated Iron Dome and other air defense capability that's around Israel that none of the missiles got through, or very few got through. Israel's response was basically hitting close to one of their more sensitive facilities that's got massive air defense around it, and showing that actually what they could do was penetrate that air defense, and therefore sending a very clear message to Iran that if you try anything, we can get through the defenses that you got and we can hit your sensitive sites, but in such a way that Iran then didn't have to invoke what it had said, where they'd said if Israel responds to us and attacks us directly, we will attack back again in an unprecedented way. So it's stopped that escalation, which can only be a good thing.
OK, what me personally, obviously, and pretty much the rest of the world is concerned about now, is how the likes of, you know, Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthis, who are, as we all know, funded by Iran, aren't they? But they operate independently, so they could take things further with Iran still keeping that safe distance.
Well, they're more than funded by Iran, and this is where, you know, the attack on the Iranian embassy compound in Damascus killed the Iranian Revolutionary Guards commander in charge of the Quds Force, which is their special forces element that coordinates all of the activities between Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, and a lot of the rebel groups inside Iraq and Syria, and provides them training, provides them finances, provides them weapons, gives them oversight, and everything else. So what the Israelis did was stirred that little wasp's nest, and therefore it's likely that now that Iran as a country has backed off, you know, the Quds Force they're a law unto themselves in many ways, which is why the Americans have designated them a terrorist organization, and they will likely stimulate some of the groups to further attack and up their ante, not just against Israel, but against US bases in Syria and Iraq, and against international shipping going up the Red Sea.
Of course, yeah. It's a waiting game. We watch and see, don't we? That's our Philip Ingram. Thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
Explaining the madness that's the Middle East. Hopefully it's not as scary as it could be, though. Right, I'm Dawn Neeson. This is GB News Saturday, and there's loads more coming up on today's show. But first, it's that time again. It's Cameron Walker with the news headlines.
Thanks, Dawn. It's 2:32. I'm Cameron Walker here in the GB newsroom. A police apology has been welcomed by the government, but the Home Office says being Jewish should never be seen as provocative. It's after a Metropolitan Police officer stopped Campaign Against Semitism Chief Executive Gideon Falter from crossing a road near a pro-Palestinian march, saying he's quite openly Jewish. The Home Office, which says the comment is unacceptable, has written to the Police Commissioner and the Mayor of London. A spokesperson for Sadiq Khan describes the Met's handling of the incident as concerning. Today, pro-Israel demonstrators are holding a peaceful counter-protest in central London. Called Enough is Enough, the group says hatred has no place on the streets of the capital. Parents and their children have staged a demonstration in Belfast over rising childcare costs. More than 1,000 people carrying balloon, placards and prams took part, calling for immediate support. Unlike England, there's no scheme offering free childcare in Northern Ireland, but some tax credits are available. Stormont politicians have requested face-to-face talks with Prime Minister Rishi Sunak to ask for more funding. A 2-minute silence has been held honouring the English men and women who made the ultimate sacrifice. Hundreds of army and naval cadets took part in a march past at the Cenotaph in central London today to mark 130 years of the Royal Society of St George. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Dawn on GB News Saturday.
Thank you very much, Cameron. Now, there's plenty more coming up on today's show, but before I tell you what we've got lined up for you, Nana has joined me in the studio to tell us all about what's coming up on her brilliant show, which is straight after this one.
It is
Nana.
straight after this, Dawn. Well, we've got quite a few exciting things. We're having a roundtable discussion about whether you should smack your children. I mean, were you smacked as a child? Be honest.
I'm afraid I was.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
so
afraid
was
I was. I don't think it did me any harm. I'm completely normal.
Well, I'm
obviously,
all
Nana.
right as well. So we're going to be talking about that, whether it's actually, whether parents should actually be criminalised for this. How are you even going to police it? Then, imagine this, Dawn, OK? So you fall onto the tube track, OK? And the tube comes and runs over one of your arms. OK, so you know your arm is gone. OK, now you're stuck on the track. You're trying to get up. Then you see another tube approaching, right?
Right.
And the tube then runs over your leg. I have a woman that's coming in today for my difficult conversations. She is telling us the story about what happened to her. That hasn't made the hairs on your back go up or given you a shiver in your spine.
That's amazing.
She is coming in
can't wait to hear that.
at 5 to give us her story.
What an amazing woman.
An amazing woman, and I can't wait to hear how she's recovering from that and how she's getting on with her life.
Wow, and this happened recently? I mean,
Well, this happened a little while ago, but she'll be in the studio at 5 o'clock and she'll give us the full story. It's an incredible story.
I love those miracle stories.
An
where
incredible
people
story.
actually come out and
she
they
survived.
fight.
She survived.
In days where we've been talking about it today, Sick Note Britain, where people have that fighting spirit and overcome all the sorts of things that people throw at them.
That's what we're talking
in the marathon
about.
as well tomorrow, won't we? Well, that's Nana's show, and that sounds a real cracker. So thank you very much, Nana. Don't go anywhere. You don't want to miss that. Now, you can let us know all the thoughts on all the stories we've been talking about, or even get in touch for Nana's show coming up soon by visiting gbnews.com/your say and join the conversation. Or message me or Nana on our socials. We're at GB News. Lots more coming up on today's show. Now, thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow, calling for yet another independence referendum. How will Westminster respond to this one? All of that and much more to come. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest weather update from GB News from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate our weather, bringing some warm sunshine for some of us. However, there will also be some patchy cloud. Low pressure remains never too far away out towards the north of the UK, but this large area of high pressure dominates our weather through the rest of the weekend. This will bring some warm sunshine, particularly for Wales, southwestern parts of England and Northern Ireland as well. However, there will be some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland that slowly spills its way southwards as we go through Saturday afternoon. Perhaps a few more breaks than the graphics are showing, so there could be some brighter spells in places. And it will be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs in the south of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees, but definitely feeling a little chillier under that cloud across parts of Scotland. Into Saturday evening, there will still be those clear spells around, but some patchy rain does arrive across northern parts of Scotland and slowly sinks its way southwards as we go into the early hours of Sunday morning. Some clear spells across eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland and Western Scotland as well, and turning chilly under those clear skies, although temperatures holding up well above zero under all that cloud. Into the start of Sunday, after a chilly start under those clear skies, it will be quite a bright start, particularly for southern and eastern parts of England and Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, seeing some sunshine through the morning. However, that patchy rain across Scotland slowly sinks its way southwards into northern parts of England, so bringing quite a grey day here. In the sunshine, though, still feeling warm again. Highs of 14 or 15 degrees in the south and around 9 or 10 degrees under that cloud.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Are the newspapers getting you down?
My wife didn't divorce me that month.
Struggling to separate the wheat from the chaff?
I know that it's a bit of a circus at the best of times.
Well, don't worry, Headliners has got you covered. We'll take the burden of reading the day's news, and if we get depressed, who cares? It's an occupational hazard, frankly. That's Headliners on GB News from 11 p.m. till midnight, and the following morning, 5 till 6 a.m. on GB News, the comedy channel. Nah, just kidding. Britain's news channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me. My guest and I tackle the issues that really matter, with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, what do you think this is? What's walking?
About what we've been talking about in the break, but I can't because they will get sacked. Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, thousands of Scottish independence campaigners are marching through the streets of Glasgow today. The organisers believe in Scotland, say the event will be about sharing their positive vision for an independent Scotland, with First Minister Hamza Yousaf expected to speak later on this afternoon. Joining me now to bring us up to date on what's happening is our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire. Hello again, Tony. Right, what's happening where you are now?
Afternoon again, Dawn. So today the sun is still out. This is a record-breaking day all on its own for that point alone. But indeed, this is the first ever Believe in Scotland Independence Rally and March, and it's come from the west end of Glasgow here to the centre of the city in George Square. Behind me you can see the stage, and that is where at the minute we've got RMT trade union leader who's on stage just now. We're going to hear from a number of people, including Green MSP Ross Greer, and then of course Hamza Yousaf. He's going to be here on stage and giving his speech. Now, a lot of people, it's safe to say, will be here today to hear from him, and they will be looking for a real pick-me-up. You know, a lot of the legislation and the priorities that have come out of the Scottish Government in the last few months, the last year, certainly under Hamza Yousaf's leadership, has been focused on other things. And you know, the independence movement, as you can hear the whistles in the background. You just missed the bagpipes and the Yes bikers. We saw about 50 or 60 bikers coming through. But indeed, I've been around talking to people on both sides of the independence debate about what their views are and why they are here today. Have a listen.
To object against the ND March still going ahead because they haven't accepted our vote in 2014. In actual fact, one day after it, the vote that they would accept, they started objecting to it and still going on about it.
To get Hamza out.
It's about ridiculous, if I'm honest. So that's why I'm here, but I'm kind of really here for my nana. So.
Well, it's our country. We want it back. Thank you very much. We've been a colony for over 300 years. We get nothing back. Everything's taken from us and goes south, and they give us pocket money back. I don't think that's very fair. As a country, we are one of the richest countries in the world. So why can't we control our own money and our own destiny?
It's not British. The union was never a voluntary arrangement. You know, it was bought and paid for by a handful of Scottish nobles, and the ordinary people absolutely never wanted the union.
there we've heard from a good few people here today. There are many thousands more, but indeed we're going to wait here through the afternoon and see just how much the public gets out of today and whether they feel another wind in their sails for the independence movement here in Scotland.
Tony, thank you very much. That's our Scotland reporter, Tony Maguire, from the Scottish Indie gathering today, where Hamza Youssef is due to speak coming up fairly soon. It'll be very interesting to see what he has to say, won't it? Now, the Met Police has apologised for causing further offence with an apology about an officer's use of the term openly Jewish to an anti-Semitism campaigner who was near a pro-Palestine march.
You are quite openly Jewish. This is a pro-Palestinian march. Right. I'm not accusing you of anything, but I'm worried about the reaction to your presence.
The chief executive of Campaign Against Anti-Semitism was wearing a kippah skull cap when he was stopped from crossing a road near the demonstration in London last Saturday. Joining me now live from the protest, indeed fresh in the office, is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much for coming back in. You've had quite a busy day so far, and a loud one. I mean, you were standing at... It was a gathering, it wasn't a march for the Israeli support group, wasn't it?
Yes, so that incident that's caused so much upset was at a pro-Palestine march last week. The one I was at today was much smaller, but it was by a pro-Israeli group called Enough is Enough, and they were basically saying, we are sick of being intimidated and feeling like Jewish people are not safe on the streets of London, and we're going to stand up in central London and be counted. They had lots of banners, lots of singing, very good-natured, very upbeat. Actually, there was a small number of pro-Palestine protesters on the other side of the road, but they were absolutely dwarfed in number by the Jewish people and pro-Israeli supporters, which is rare because, as we've seen for months and months and months, we've had massive pro-Palestine demonstrations and Jewish people often feeling intimidated.
I mean, that story where the police says you look openly Jewish, I mean, you know, to someone just walking across the street in London. I mean, I get that, you know, they were trying to keep the peace quite literally. But how... I mean, I found that story one of the most shocking things I've read, sort of like, certainly for a good while. What was the feeling of the actual Jewish people that were there? They must feel devastated by that sort of thing.
Yes, they were horrified, and they were talking to me. I was talking to them before the demo today kicked off, saying, you know, what is the world coming to when, as a London Jew, I feel that I can't walk safely round the streets. But the way that the police has dealt with this, you know, they've come in for a huge amount of criticism and they've made things worse for themselves because the initial statement that they issued following this, they basically said, look, there's a trend of people who are opposed to the demonstration coming along to be beside it, filming it. They must know that in being there, they're being provocative. So sort of blaming, basically, the Jewish guy that was there. Of course, that caused outrage. They then had to apologise for that, issued another statement and then said, being Jewish is not a provocation. Jewish Londoners must be able to feel safe in this city. The fact that they're saying that in itself is astonishing. But I do think it is very difficult for the police because, as another officer said in another clip to the same chap, if you are attacked, there's not enough of us to keep you safe. And I think that would be their argument, that they are trying to keep people safe and they didn't feel that they could with the numbers that are there. But, you know, these are supposedly peaceful marches. I think the majority of people are peaceful, but nevertheless, there is an element at these marches that makes many people feel very, very uneasy and threatened.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it should not be happening, should it, in London? Thank you very much, Catherine Forster, who has been covering our pro-Israel and pro-Palestine gatherings today in London. Right, OK, I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Saturday, and there's lots more coming up on today's show. Another day, another record broken by, oh God, Taylor Swift. In less than 12 hours, Swift's new The Tortured Poets Department double album has become Spotify's most streamed album in a single day in 2024 so far. All of that and much more to come. This is GB News, Britain's news channel. Don't go too far.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m. It's the first time we've had an admission from someone who at least used to be very senior in the party, saying that this election is not about winning, really, for the Conservatives now. It's about mitigating the losses.
There is broad recognition that this election has already been lost and that it's about damage limitation. And it is really important because it's the difference between whether, if Labour win a slim majority, then the fight is on for the next election. I know it seems silly to look 5 years ahead, but it does make a difference, versus basically accepting that we have 10 years of Labour government ahead.
Having an acknowledgement that the Tories are going to lose and lose badly, disastrously maybe, having that acknowledgement coming from somebody so senior is very demoralising for everybody else in the party, but also doesn't it make it then look rather immoral for them to just drag on right through to maybe November?
Personally, I think Rishi Sunak should name the date now. I think he should name it for October or November.
In terms of reform, if they're only 4 points behind the Conservatives in the latest poll, do we need to stop the narrative, which we have been using legitimately, saying, well, they're doing all right in the polls, but they won't win any seats? Do we need to change that perspective now?
I think it's really difficult to say. It depends on Reform's electoral strategy. There's a lot of evidence that in certain parts of the country with certain demographics, they do have a really good chance. So I think if they target seats in the Red Wall and other places where there's big disillusionment with the Conservatives and what they'd promised, I can't imagine that Reform are at the stage where they could take masses of seats. It's more about that portion of the vote that they'll be taking away that I think is going to result in that massive Labour landslide.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Welcome back to GB News Saturday with me, Dawn Neeson, on your telly, online and on digital radio. Now, another day, another record broken by Taylor Swift. In less than 12 hours, Swift's new The Tortured Poets Department double album has become Spotify's most streamed album in a single day in 2024 so far. The album was released just yesterday to critical acclaim, with fans around the world saying it's her best yet. I have absolutely zero idea what I'm talking about. So here is someone who does. You've already seen her on the box today, and she's brilliant, isn't she?
Thank you, Dawn. I'm a Swiftie. I'm a Swiftie.
Whatever.
So this is her 11th studio album, Dawn. She mentioned this back in February that she was working on this album. So since then, Swifties worldwide have been waiting for this album. On Thursday, there was a story that broke that apparently it got leaked, but Taylor Swift is very smart. You can never outdo Taylor Swift. Not only did she come out with one album yesterday, she came out with 2. So people thought they were just getting one, but she done a double album full of 31 tracks.
Right.
And Dawn, the figures, 200 million streams in one day for this album. And why? What is the fascination about Taylor Swift? She's had a lot of high-profile romances, Calvin Harris, Harry Styles, and what she does, she always does an Adele. She always writes about her love life in her album. So right now, people are deciphering what is this album about in terms of love lives. She talks about her feud with Kim Kardashian. So Taylor Swift is that artist that bears her soul into albums.
Is that what makes her so popular? Because younger women, obviously a lot younger, younger women can sort of like identify with what she's going through, obviously in a much, much less privileged environment.
Yeah, I think what it is with Taylor Swift, a lot of people have been on this journey with her over the past 15 years with her music. So every album you get with Taylor Swift, it's like an evolution. It's like with Adele, you know, she'll come out with 30, and you know, it shows where she's at that age, and I think that's what it is with Taylor Swift. And more than anything, her work ethic, Dawn, is crazy. Last 4 years, she's released 8 albums, you know, under her belt. So she loves touring, and she's a self-made billionaire, and she's part of the only musician out there to make that billion just from songwriting and touring.
So she is inspirational for young women. I mean, that's another
She
good thing
is.
about her,
She
isn't
is, and she's not one of those ones where Taylor's fake. She's not fake. She's a good songwriter, and she treats her music like an art. And I think, you know, today's World Record Day, Record Shop Day, and she's even released the album on vinyl.
On vinyl?
As well.
How cool is
It's
that?
all marketing.
Oh, is
it's
it?
all
Did I see her
marketing.
looking through it? It's like a see-through
Yeah,
vinyl thing.
£44 though.
What?
It's £44.
That's how she's very rich, isn't it?
Yes, it is. But give it a listen, Dawn. You might convert and become a Swiftie.
I was actually listening to The Doors on the way into.
Oh,
with a bit of Guns N' Roses.
We can swap.
No,
we can
not
swap.
doing it.
We can swap Spotify playlist.
Stephanie, thank you very much.
Lots
You're
of
an
love.
absolute star today, Stephanie Tetchy, on All Things Showbiz. Right, OK, we're running out of time. Oh, my God, it's been wonderful. I'm Dawn Neeson, and this is GB News Saturday, and thank you so much for joining me. I've really had a lovely time, and I'm back tomorrow, but don't go anywhere, because there's plenty more coming up on GB News Today. In a moment, it's Fiery Debate with Nana Aquia, and at 6 p.m, it's this Saturday 5. But first, it is the weather with... Who is doing the weather? Is it Ellie today? Ellie, the lovely Ellie. So let's find out how the rest of your weekend is looking. I'm back serving lunch tomorrow, so don't go too far and stay tuned for Nana. See you soon. Have a go of it. Good evening.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon and welcome to your latest GB News weather from the Met Office. So high pressure does continue to dominate, but it will be feeling a little chillier along some eastern coasts. The area of high pressure situated across the UK does bring a bit of a northeasterly breeze, so some chillier conditions, but plenty of dry weather around due to that area of high pressure. So some late afternoon and evening sunshine for some of us. However, some thicker cloud across parts of Scotland will bring some outbreaks of patchy rain, particularly for northern parts of Scotland, slowly sinking its way southwards into the early hours of the morning. Southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland holding on to those clearer skies and turning quite chilly there, however, remaining frost-free under that cloud and patchy rain. So for eastern parts of Scotland, a bit of a cloudy and grey and damp start to the day on Sunday. However, southeastern parts of England, Northern Ireland and western parts of Scotland seeing the best of the sunshine through the morning. Perhaps 1 or 2 showers bubbling up across southeastern parts of England through the afternoon, but it should be staying dry for most places. However, that band of patchy rain slowly continues to sink its way southwards and feeling quite chilly under that cloud and rain too. However, in the sunshine, feeling very pleasant, highs of 14, 15, maybe 16 degrees across the south. Monday does start a bit of a greyer day for most of us. Outbreaks of rain continue to slowly push their way southwards, but southeastern parts of England probably holding on to that sunshine and feeling quite pleasant in that sunshine too. Maybe 1 or 2 showers around on Tuesday or Wednesday, but temperatures will be slowly recovering closer to average for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
With thanks to Variety Cruises, a family company sailing since 1942, you have the chance to win a £10,000 7-night small boat cruise for 2. With flights, meals, excursions and drinks included, you'll be able to choose from any one of their 2025 Greek adventures and explore Greece like never before. Plus, you'll also win £10,000 in tax-free cash to make your summer sizzle. And we'll pack you off with these luxury travel gifts. For another chance to win a prize worth over £20,000, text prize to 63232. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB04 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 26th of April. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope.